Councillors, welcome and please stand. Almighty God, we the representatives of the citizens of the City of Brisbane are assembled here to strive and care for the welfare of our city and all its people. Lord, we ask that you guide us in the decisions we make today. Amen. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay our respect to elders past and present. Please be seated. I declare the meeting open. Are there any apologies? There being no apologies, councillors, minutes please.
Mr Chair, I move that the minutes of the 4,639th meeting held on Tuesday, 16 February 2021 be received, taken as read and confirmed.
Seconded.
It's been moved by Councillor Lander, seconded by Councillor Hutton, that the minutes of the 4,639th meeting of Council held on the 16th of February 2021 be received, taken as read and confirmed. All those in favour please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Councillors, I draw your attention to the agenda item public participation. We will be addressed by Dr Ian Scott, who will address us on development in Kangaroo Point. Dr Scott. Welcome, Dr Scott. You have 5 minutes to present today. Your time begins when you begin, and you can sit or stand, whichever is your preference. Welcome.
Mr Chair, Lord Mayor, councillors. What do we want our city to be is the question. Many would argue it is a city that promotes a sense of community and belonging, respects our natural environment and our heritage, addresses the challenges of climate change, future pandemics, and other threats to public health and well-being, blends green space with architecturally aesthetic buildings, displays a love of charm, culture and modernity. Is that what we have or even aspire to? Sadly, in Kangaroo Point, the answer is definitely no, and it could soon be no for much of Brisbane. The cancer killing our suburb and spreading to all parts of the city is unbridled overdevelopment by rapacious, arrogant developers driven by profit and taking us, the ratepayers, and taking you, the council, for a ride. We are told council needs to contain urban sprawl which imposes unsustainable transport and infrastructure costs. The state government demands that 188,000 new dwellings be established in South East Queensland over the next few years to meet expected population growth. The answer seems to be to cram as many people as possible into a 5-kilometre radius within the Brisbane CBD. Kangaroo Point, which is my suburb, is the epicentre of these imposts. Despite already being the most densely populated suburb in Brisbane, it's going to be jammed even tighter, with more high-rise, despite already having several multi-storey buildings that are half empty or completely empty more than a year after completion. We have no less than 26 development applications approved or pending within our boundary. More than half are concentrated around Lambert Street, set to cram an additional 1,000 apartments into an area with winding, narrow streets, no shops, no schools, little public transport after 7 p.m, no community services, hardly any green space or parkland, very few remaining pre-1946 buildings, no Riverwalk link, and more traffic and congestion along the green vein that's going to link the new Green Bridge with the eastern suburbs, thus posing risk to cyclists and pedestrians. Is this really livable Brisbane? Council is asking us to have density but without the benefits. Now, perhaps this sorry state of affairs was never intended by Council. I refer to the twin evils of the 2016 State Planning Act and the 2020 Kangaroo Point Neighbourhood Plan, both of which, in our view, need to be revoked and rewritten with extensive and representative community input. The Planning Act allows considerable latitude in what can be classed as code accessible for any new development, in that, if certain very flexible rules are met, the developer can apply for almost automatic approval by the Council. Less and less of these applications are deemed impact accessible, which calls for an assessment of their impact on the surrounding community. Code accessible blocks us, the community, out of the approval process, even though we have to live with the impacts of these developments long after the developers have taken their profits and departed the scene. Approval can still be granted if it comes close, or if developers, usually using highly paid town planners and lawyers, can argue that their proposal meets the overall intention of development in the area according to the neighbourhood plan. As a result, Council is pushed into approving applications which subsequently prove very unpopular. We then find ourselves in situations where ratepayers, including some aged in their 80s and 90s, are forced to participate in street marches and public demonstrations to let the council know just how much they dislike a particular application. And then when the council does have the gumption to refuse an application, these code-assessable rules result in court proceedings between council and the developer, costing ratepayers time and money which could be better spent elsewhere. For our part, we are not against development per se, but it must be responsive to community opinion. Neighbourhood plans are contracts between the council and the community as to how their suburbs are to evolve. In developing these plans, the council must adequately consult the community through the medium of representative community planning teams and public meetings, and then the agreed plan must be enacted. It can't be concocted, manipulated, ignored or violated under duress from developers. The 2020 Kangaroo Point plan raised code-assessable building heights from 10 to 15 stories, amongst other things, but with inadequate community consultation and with undue influence from developers. How so? Well, first, the draft plan attracted fewer than 214 community submissions, less than 2% of the population, compared to more than 50% for West End. When we ask our fellow residents, did you know about this plan? The answer is no. Second, the council has confirmed that from 2016 onwards, a developer, Pedro Picos, was on the Kangaroo Point community planning team. Because he owned a lot at 108 Lambert Street, Mr Picos, it was argued, had as much right to be on the team as any other local resident or shopkeeper or small business owner. But Mr Picos did not live in a house or conduct a business on this lot, and the lot was one of several he subsequently acquired in order to amalgamate them into a parcel of land in which he intended to erect 3 apartment towers, initially 10 stories with 199 apartments. But with the change in the building heights in the new plan, Mr Picos then applied for 15 stories with 300 apartments and the removal of 3 pre-1911 workers' cottages. His potential profit from changes to the plan is in the many millions of dollars, far in excess of any gains to be held.
Dr Scott, your time has expired. If you wouldn't mind taking a seat, and I'll invite, I believe, Councillor Adams to respond to you. No, please, no, you're welcome to stay. Councillor Adams.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Chair, and thank you, Mr Scott, for coming today. I'd like to thank you, Laurie and James, who came to see me in my office again earlier this month as well. And I know from our discussions there that went for quite a while that there are many things we agree on and there are many things we disagree on. With regards to today, you're here again around the application on 108 Lambert Street. And with regards to this application, there are 2 that we have been dealing with in this area. One was approved in July 2020. That was for the 3 10-storey buildings. And the second one that was refused in December 2020, that was the proposal for the 3 15-storey buildings. In addition, we have applications for the 3 pre-1911 homes, 2 of these which have been approved to allow the houses to move to TBC area in Old Cleveland Road in Camp Hill, and another one that is still under assessment and proposed to be relocated to Allen Street in Hamilton. As you know, the application for the 15 stories which has been refused is now being appealed and sitting in Planning and Environment Court, so I do need to limit my comments in regard to this. However, I would like to go through to provide some detail again about how we got to this stage, because you seem to be questioning again the process of the neighbourhood plan and the community planning team when it came to that neighbourhood plan. You mentioned that during our meeting as well, and following our meeting I took a much closer look into it, as I wasn't planning chair at the time, to make sure that we had followed the processes that we have in every single neighbourhood plan across the city, and I am confident this is exactly what occurred. For the benefit of the chamber, the requests to be on the community planning team for the neighbourhood plan were open from the 6th of October 2016. They closed on the 4th of November 2016. We had over 80 people who wanted to join the team, but for the sake of managing the process, we usually keep it around 30, so we can actually get very decent conversation and one-on-one drilling down on what the community planning team would like to see. Again, as I mentioned earlier to you, it's regrettable that neither yourself, Laurie, or James nominated to be on the team, but it was out for a month in the local area. Regardless, there were 12 female, 18 males that were appointed to the community planning team between the ages of 20 and 70, and they came from a wide variety of professions. We had a restaurant manager, an architect, lawyer, surgeon, retired accountant, finance manager, student, public policy specialist, real estate agent, professor, landowners, those who live in the area, and owners who lived outside the area, a very large range. The idea of the CPT, the Community Planning Team, is to represent a cross-section of interests and be in a position to represent and feed back to larger community networks. The council officers look at all the nominations received and make sure that they reflect the diversity of the community that the community planning team are representing. I think the thing to make clear note of is that we did have 83 nominations to be in that CPT, so it was heard about in the local area. And the other thing to take note is the community planning team is not the decision-making body. They are not the 30 people who decide what happens in the neighbourhood plan. So they contribute to the discussion and the draft with the town planners who work in council. Then on top of that, there was first consultation of the draft strategy from 27th of October to the 8th of December 2017, 2 in-person public information sessions in Captain Burke Park and CT White Park, sent to the state government for review to make sure that they were comfortable with what was actually being suggested, and then a second round of public consultation from the 5th of October to the 19th of November 2018. Overall, more than 7 weeks of consultation in between the 2 drafts, as well as it being up on council for the entire time, and then the next 6 months of council very carefully going every single submission that was received during this period and outside the period to make sure they got the balance of the entire community as well. Finally, it was sent back to the state government for the second check, and they did tick that off. It was here in the council chamber on the 19th of November 2019. So this is not something that was done overnight. It took 3 years from an inception to its completion, with major consultation across the community and the state government having 2 opportunities to make sure that they saw what was happening in Kangaroo Point as a reflection of their Planning Act that you mentioned of 2016 and of the South East Queensland Regional Plan and the dwelling targets that they set for us. In terms of infrastructure for the area, obviously, the conversation we had earlier in the month, we are full steam ahead with the Kangaroo Point Green Bridge. It is going to take 83,000 cars off the road every year. It will be a crucial link for residents in Kangaroo Point wanting to get across the river. The Riverwalk, it's in our long-term infrastructure plan, but the state government, I believe, have begun to promise delivering the missing links during their election as well. We are working on the ferry terminals in the area, and currently we have already gotten together building setbacks along there to make sure that the Riverwalk and the ferry terminals can work together as well. I know yourself and Laurie and other members of the community have written a number of letters to the Lord Mayor since our meeting, and they will be fully responded to in due course. Thank you for coming into council today, and I appreciate the very strong interest you have in your local area.
Thank you, Dr Scott. Mr Pearce will assist you. Councillors, you will see there is a second public participant today, Mrs Christy Clark, who will be discussing the Norman Park ferry discontinuation. Welcome, Mrs Clark. You have 5 minutes, beginning when you begin. You can sit or stand, whichever is your preference, and begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Mr Chair, Lord Mayor and councillors, good afternoon. If there's one thing you take away from my address today, it is that with respect to the removal of the Norman Park ferry service, council has failed in meeting its own code of conduct. The code commits to transparent and effective processes, decision-making in the public interest, meaningful community engagement. There has been zero community consultation, no consideration of alternative options, no assessment of the impact this decision has on community stakeholders. Decision-making has not been in the public interest of the 1,500 plus signatories to community petitions or the 350 people who recently attended a public meeting which Lord Mayor Schrinner and Councillor Murphy declined to attend. Council has displayed further ineffective processes by contracting the incompatible Kitty Cat boats, then running a duplicate service with the only remaining monohull ferry at Bulimba, where a Kitty Cat could have been utilised, allowing Norman Park service to continue until proper community consultation was carried out. The Councillor's Code of Conduct also relates to management of assets and infrastructure and excellence in service delivery. Council has let the heritage-listed ferry terminal degrade. Council did not maintain the wooden monohull ferries. Council ran the Norman Park ferry service on set and forget. Lord Mayor Schrinner and Councillor Murphy are negatively manipulating patronage figures to suit their own agenda, averaging that less than one passenger travelled on each service of the Norman Park ferry. The facts are, the boat crossed the river an excessive number of times per day. Almost 50,000 people took this ferry service each year. They're your statistics. Council is running public transport services which are much less patronised, including bus services with less than 2,000 passengers per year, congesting our roads. The $7 million Council is quoting as the cost to upgrade the Norman Park Ferry Terminal is equally as fabricated. The facts are that $7 million buys a terminal the size of the New Farm Park facility, which accommodates 2 city cats at the same time. Yet, the new river hub at New Farm Park could accommodate numerous ferries and cost only $2.5 million. But this facility is not for public transport, but for the benefit of private boat owners, misuse of funds, which could have been allocated to delivering on Council's public transport plan objective to reduce traffic congestion. Cancelling the Norman Park ferry service is in direct contradiction to Council's own strategy. Brisbane is the second most congested city in Australia, yet Council is reducing access to non-road-based public transport options. Norman Park ratepayers are charged extraordinary premiums on rates. Excuse me, Lord Mayor, but what are we getting for our rates money? The Council's Code of Conduct also commits to social inclusion. The events of the past 12 months have been unprecedented. At a time when many people in our community are experiencing mental ill health, the Council has chosen to cut off a vital lifeline for so many without consultation, without regard for the community. River transport opens up a wealth of opportunities for connection, but Council has divided the city in half and increased isolation for so many. For many people in our community, our decision to live in Norman Park was heavily influenced by the existence of the ferry service because it's a core factor in livability. The lack of access to the river reduces livability and likely erodes property values. A conservative estimate of the total land value in Norman Park climbs well into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Rates revenue is directly linked to property value. Removing the Norman Park ferry service is very short-sighted. On behalf of the Norman Park community, I urge Lord Mayor Schrinner and Councillor Murphy to refresh your memories as to the Councillor's Code of Conduct. We ask that you discontinue your generic communication and manipulation of the facts. We request proper consultation without further delay. We ask that you uphold your responsibilities as elected representatives of the River City. Thank you.
Mrs Clark, I will invite Councillor Murphy to respond to you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms Clark, and thank you for taking the time to come in and address Council today on the closure of the Norman Park Ferry. First and foremost, can I assure you we take absolutely no pleasure in removing public transport services. I assure you that when we do so, it is in the public interest. I'd like to take some time to address some of the key points that you've raised here today. Firstly, around the lack of community consultation. As you may recall, the situation with the timber ferries was not one of council's choosing. It was a situation that was forced on council suddenly. We had to pull every ferry service in the city overnight with zero consultation. Any subsequent decisions around the future network have been made with an understanding that even if we wanted to provide the services to those terminals today, we could not do so, as we only have 5 replacement vessels out of an original fleet of 9. So announcing an intent to close this service and closing the service would have in effect been the same thing, and I suspect the community response would have been the same regardless. In any case, I'd like to make the point that this is not the first time the Norman Park Ferry has been discontinued. The Cross River Ferry has never been highly patronised. It operated from 1912, primarily in private ownership, and then it came into council's direct control in the latter part of the 20th century. Due to low patronage, it was closed in 1996 by the Sawley Labor Administration when CityCat services were first introduced. The terminal was closed until December 1998 when the Norman Park terminal was reopened on a trial basis, and residents at that stage were told use it or lose it, again by the Sawley Labor Administration. And then due to low patronage, the service was again cancelled and the terminal was closed in December 2000, once again by the Sawley Labor Administration. And I know this was a long time ago. Unfortunately, we have one councillor here in this place who was around at the time. Councillor Cumming was in the Sawley administration, and he may be able to tell you the history of low patronage. And
Councillors, this is a public participant. No interjections, please. A member of the public has come here to address us. She'll be shown due respect. Councillor Murphy.
Chair, he may be able to tell you why they took a similar decision to the decision that we have taken today. The service was reopened in January 2007 on a trial basis by the then Liberal Lord Mayor Campbell Newman. Unfortunately, that trial has now lasted 14 years, and we've only seen a steady decline in patronage, particularly when compared to the rest of the ferry fleet. The question must be asked, how long is long enough for this trial to go on? If we can't consider a service sustainable after 14 years, how long should we wait? Secondly, you've questioned the veracity of council's costings and made a comparison to the less expensive river hubs. However, a recreation hub or a river hub is for short-term recreational vessels. For recreation hubs, a general accessibility standard applies. When it comes to ferry terminals, the disability standards for public transport apply, which is a much higher standard of construction and therefore a much higher estimate of cost. And the cost estimate for the Norman Park Ferry was based on a similar terminal design as to what has been developed for the dockside terminal. So comparing recreation hubs to public terminals is a bit like comparing apples to oranges, and they seem similar, but they are vastly different. I also know that you've questioned the patronage data that we have provided. The patronage data that you are quoting is TransLink ticketing data, and we have willingly shared this with the Friends of the Norman Park Ferry. It demonstrates, I believe, why the service was cancelled 3 times. I understand there are some residents in Norman Park who enjoyed access to New Farm Park. I'm sure there's many residents across the city who would enjoy that, but it's clearly not feasible as a commuter route. Even one of the public speakers who came to council last week later admitted on radio that he only used the ferry to occasionally access the markets in the powerhouse. And this is, I think, the whole point behind the cancellation in the first place. Interestingly, the Lord Mayor and I have received very little feedback from residents who live on the other side of the river, which leads us to believe that there's very little reciprocal travel, i.e. New Farm residents travelling over to Norman Park, which is part of what makes a service sustainable from a cost perspective. This, coupled with the sustained low patronage over many years, shows us that this was a bespoke service, not in keeping with the principles behind public transport. And of course, 50,000 trips sounds very significant, but in context, the Bulimba to Tenerife services approximately 210,000 passengers every year. Now, Ms Clark, you stated that there were bus services with low patronage, and this is true. We do run buses with low patronage. This is usually because there is limited access to public transport in areas in which these services run. Norman Park, for example, has 29 bus stops, 14 routes comprised of 11 regular routes and 2 district routes, a Nightlink bus service, as well as a major train station on the Cleveland line. It's perhaps for this reason that the ferry has been unpopular over the years because there are many other ways to travel using public transport within Norman Park. Now, whereas buses can be rerouted, ferry services require far more infrastructure to build. Terminals themselves require multiple levels of government approvals and specialised construction methodology. Finally, I note that you raised your concern for property prices in your area and the livability. And I note that Norman Park is considered a high demand area for property as compared to the rest of the state and indeed in Brisbane. So I can't agree that the loss of one ferry service would have a material effect on the housing market within Norman Park. In any case, compensation for any real or perceived loss due to public transport decisions is not a service that Council provides or is obligated to provide. Now, I also appreciate the time that you have taken to address us today. I can assure you that Council will not be reversing this decision. We remain committed to further dialogue with residents on the future of the site. I want to thank you for taking the time to address us today.
Thank you, Mrs Clark. Mr Pearce will attend to you. Councillors, we'll now begin question time. Are there any questions of the Lord Mayor or Chair of any standing committee? Councillor Owen.
Thank you. My question this afternoon is to the Chair of the Public and Active Transport Committee, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Murphy, in the last couple of weeks, there have been 2 more incidents of chroming reported on our council buses. What is Council doing to keep our bus drivers safe, and what can other levels of government do to help?
Councillor Murphy.
Well, thank you for your question, Councillor Owen, and through you, Mr Chair, the crime that is occurring on our buses is absolutely shameful. We were all in shock at the horrific acid attack that occurred on a drive in Loganholme earlier this month, and I'm sure I join with everyone in the chamber to condemn the repulsive actions of the person who attacked this bus driver. I'm pleased to hear that he has suffered no permanent damage to his face and is expected to make a full recovery. This attack underscores, I think, Chair, the complexities of the work that our bus drivers do, dealing with tens of thousands of members of the public every day. They see them at their best and they also see them at their worst. Brisbane City Council is one of the largest bus operators in the country, employing more than 2,200 bus operators, servicing 6,000 bus stops. And as the city's major provider of public transport, we are absolutely committed to the safety of our staff. Our buses carry more than 73 million passengers annually, and our bus drivers and our passengers deserve to feel safe when they travel on public transport. Now, it's impossible to predict the random nature of each assault that happens against a driver, which is why we're doing everything we can to protect our valued bus drivers. But this is clearly a complex issue, and it's not a problem that local government can tackle alone. So we're calling everyone to help, from the residents that catch our buses all the way to the Premier's office. Everyone needs to do their part to help our bus drivers. The old saying, if you see something, say something, still applies. We want to encourage passengers to record and report any crime or suspicious activity on public transport. That's why today I can announce that we've partnered with Crime Stoppers to develop a targeted campaign aimed at supporting safe travel on Brisbane's buses. Over the next few months, keep your eyes peeled for important Crime Stopper advertisements on the back of Brisbane buses. We want people to tell us what you know, not who you are, and we'll use the slogan, everyone deserves to feel safe while travelling. Working with the public, we'll make sure that antisocial behaviour on Brisbane's buses is reported and that the perpetrators face justice. But, Chair, we read that this is an issue not just in Brisbane but across the entire state, with unions like the Transport Workers Union and the Bus and Coach Drivers Association not afraid to speak out about the state government dragging their heels on important legislation. One of the biggest issues that our hard-working bus operators face is exposure to volatile substance use, commonly referred to as chroming. This year alone, we've had 23 incidents reported on Brisbane's buses. In one incident recently, a bus operator had to go home after suffering an asthma attack. This is why today I've written to the Attorney-General, Shannon Fentiman, to ask that the State Parliament take action to make chroming on public transport illegal. Mr Chair, as you would expect, Council has robust measures in place to manage the aftermath of chroming on our bus services, but we are unable to prevent incidences from occurring. Currently, chroming is not an offence, nor is it an offence to be in possession of volatile substances, even if it has or is intended to be misused or inhaled. In the eyes of the law, these people are doing nothing wrong. In my letter to the Attorney-General, I am pleading with her to make chroming illegal on the public transport network, including on buses, ferries and trains, and at bus stops, railway stations, busway stations and bus interchanges for the safety of our employees and the commuting public. Currently, it is an offence to consume food or drink, to occupy more than one seat, to play a musical instrument on a railway, to spit in or on a vehicle or infrastructure, and to take an animal other than an assistance animal on a public passenger vehicle other than a city cat. So I'm sure that you would agree that there is scope to create a specific offence for chroming. I, like many of my council colleagues, have, including the Lord Mayor and the Deputy Mayor, have written to Transport Minister after Transport Minister calling for an increased presence of senior network officers on the Brisbane bus and ferry network as per the Sentencing Council recommendation. And as a result of our campaign, they've now provided 11 new senior network officers, and I welcome that. We're now calling on the Attorney-General to help us to protect hard-working drivers from chroming. This is a request that I know is supported by our bus drivers and many members of the Rail, Tram and Bus Union. Unlike the TWU and the Bus and Coach Drivers Association, you won't ever hear from the RTBU leadership about chroming or about anything that will criticise the state Labor government, because that would be a bridge too far. But we know that their members care about this issue. We've seen recently the state government has come under fire for passing less legislation and spending less time in Parliament than any other administration this century. Well, now is the time, Chair, to make up for lost time and to protect our bus drivers from the appalling youth crime issues affecting our workforce. If you can't drink a coffee on a bus, you shouldn't be able to huff paint. If you can't bring a cat onto a bus, you shouldn't be able to sniff glue. It doesn't pass the pub test, Mr Chair. So now is the time for the state government to take action on this very important safety issue for our bus
Councillor
drivers.
Murphy, your time has expired. Are there any further questions? Councillor Cook.
My question is to the Chair of the Public and Active Transport Committee, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Murphy, when will you meet with Norman Park residents in person to discuss the termination of their ferry service as you promised last year?
Councillor Murphy.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Cook, and thank you for the question. I can assure Councillor Cook that I'm more than happy to take meeting requests from members of the Norman Park Ferry Association. I haven't to date have only had, I think, one request from a member. We haven't yet found a date, but I'm more than happy to meet with any of the members of the Norman Park Ferry Committee in person. As you know, the Lord Mayor and I were unable to make the public meeting, which happened, I believe, 2 weeks ago. But we have an open door policy when it comes to friends of the Norman Park Ferry. And I can tell you, Councillor Cook, that many of them, I'm sure, will be meeting with me on the 3rd of March when we will be going out to the suburbs, to Carina, to the Belmont, ironically, the Belmont Bowls Club, which is in Carina, to talk with members of the Brisbane public about a whole range of issues, not just public transport, but all about our agenda to make the Brisbane of tomorrow even better than the Brisbane of today. Thank you, Chair.
Further questions? Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Mr Chair. My question is, when I get my glasses on, sorry. My question is to the Chair of City Planning and Economic Development Committee, Councillor Adams. Deputy Mayor, a new tourism campaign has been launched in the southern states with the support of Brisbane Economic Development Agency. Can you outline how Brisbane EDA and Council are planning to lure visitors back to Brisbane now COVID restrictions have eased?
Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Councillor Hammond, for the question. And yes, through you, Mr Chair, there has never been a more important time to get out there and support tourism right here in Brisbane after what has been nothing short of a devastating 12 months for the industry. Up until December 2019, Brisbane had experienced 22 quarters of continuous growth in visitation. This came off the back of more than $12 billion invested in tourism, transport and other major infrastructure projects across the city and the region. More than 5,000 new hotel rooms built since 2014, the completion of Howard Smith Wharves, and of course the delivery of Brisbane Metro, Victoria Park, Green Bridges and Queen's Wharf development on the horizon. We were well on our way to building a globally recognised tourism brand and world-class leisure destination. Fast forward to the quarter ending June 2020 and we lost an estimated $20.7 million in tourism expenditure every single day in Brisbane. The Brisbane Economic Development Agency have taken a leading role to help restore the sector, working with city leaders, partners and local businesses to deliver a series of campaigns and initiatives across the visitor economy. Businesses in the CBD, and particularly those in accommodation, dining, arts and entertainment sectors, were undoubtedly the hardest hit when restrictions and social distancing measures were at their highest, making it extremely difficult to plan ahead for venues and secure entertainment or events during what is normally their busiest time of the year. But if one thing we have learnt through COVID, it's that building strength and diversity in our local economy is the key to recovery, and that's exactly what we did. Early months of recovery in Brisbane were focused on building confidence in the community to be able to get out and about and discover their own backyard. From December through to February, Brisbane EDA delivered a targeted 6-week intrastate marketing campaign focused on drawing visitors from the outskirts of Brisbane into the city to stay a few nights and experience our city's diverse summer calendar. Indicative results show the campaign drove more than 40,000 clicks direct to retailer booking platforms and around 35,000 views on the Visit Brisbane page. With over 300 days of sunshine a year, we are a city that spends most of our time outside, enjoying the sights and the scenery, and that's what we were promoting. From Bay to the river and up to the hinterland, we definitely have a competitive advantage over other cities. Major events are a key tourism driver for Brisbane, and in the past few weeks alone we've launched a series of events including Curiosity Brisbane, World Science Festival, Brisbane Cycling Festival, Nitro World Games and of course in May the NRL Magic Round. These events attract interstate and intrastate visitation to the city and are a huge economic boost to our local economy. But the private sector is also working with us to make sure that they support the local economy. We see developments in new breweries across the city, new experiences for people to experience in Brisbane. And at committee last week, we saw the building and construction industry going above and beyond to provide at-plane, public plaza and realm outcomes that are fantastic, not just for our people that live in Brisbane, but when you bring friends and relatives or people visiting Brisbane as well. The outcomes that we see at Coronation Drive, where we have a beautiful heritage house restored with a public plaza, and Fish Lane with Town Square and the connection it's going to have to the fantastic Metro project as well. Even more exciting at the moment, under assessment, we have the world's greenest building. Now, that has the ability to not only provide exemplar residential and public realm outcome, but to attract tourists for its architecture and its design. This building has even had a double thumbs up from Sir David Attenborough about its green credentials and going above and beyond when it comes to building and construction and making icons an important part of the city.
Point of order, Councillor Sri.
I think the chair's misleading the chamber. That wasn't actually David Attenborough's account.
No, that's not a point of order.
It's a fan account.
Not a point of order. Councillor Adams.
He's against green buildings.
I take the note, Mr Chair. I'll take the interjection that the Green Council is against green buildings. Brisbane EDA's new campaign called Brisbane Even Better With You will run over the next month and is primarily aimed at Sydney, regional New South Wales and Melbourne market, but will also reach Canberra, Hobart, Darwin, Adelaide, Perth and the Gold Coast, delivering a series of high-impact TV, radio, cinema and paid social and video ads. We are confident that the multi-channel tactical campaign will provide a much-needed boost to tourism over the next few months and will look to continue this into the winter periods. Brisbane is getting better all the time, and this campaign is about capturing the essence of how Brisbane has evolved as a visitor destination, with more to see and do for holidaymakers and residents alike.
Further questions? Councillor Cook.
Thank you. My question is to the Chair of the Community Arts and Nighttime Economy Committee, Councillor Howard. Councillor Howard, late last week, your Community Facilities team sent out a request for stakeholder feedback on a proposal by East Rugby Union to redevelop and commercialise CP Bottomley Park. This site has been the subject of an ongoing dispute between East, this LNP Council and Coorparoo Cricket, which ultimately last year saw Coorparoo Cricket booted out of their home of over 20 years. My local community and Labor councillors have rallied behind Coorparoo Cricket, signing petitions, attending rallies, launching urgency motions so that they could stay in their beloved clubhouse and on their grounds, which has a very rare turf wicket. Despite this, they remain without a home ground and feel abandoned by this council. This council and you personally have attacked the club and dragged their name through the mud with numerous allegations, many of which have now been exposed as mistruths.
Point of order, Mr Chair.
Point of order to you, Deputy Mayor.
2 minutes and a question would be nice.
Hang on. No commentary, please. Councillor Cook has 45 seconds. I trust she will ask the question within that time.
Thank you.
No, Councillor Johnston. Allow Councillor Cook to ask her question, please. Councillor Cook.
Councillor Howard, you and your team have clearly known about East redevelopment plans for some time. So my question to you is this. Did this knowledge influence your decision to kick Coorparoo Cricket out of their home of over 20 years, or do you plan to stick to your story that it's all the club's fault?
Councillor Howard.
Well, thank you, Mr Chair, and I thank Councillor Cook through you, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, as has been said many times in this chamber, Coorparoo Cricket Club undertook unapproved works at CP Bottomley Park in the first half of 2020, causing an estimated $100,000 in damage. The club had an informal agreement with the head lessee at CP Bottomley Park to operate on the site, but this has since been terminated. So council supported the club to try and find another location to operate. However, the suggestions put forward were declined by the club. Should the club want to explore any further opportunities for lease arrangements at existing council lease sites, they are welcome to apply through the normal processes. It is not council's responsibility to mediate between head lessees and those in hire agreement arrangements. We want to see cricket continue at CP Bottomley Park, and we will continue to support this. East Rugby Union have submitted an application for works to council, which we are yet to review. As part of the standard application for works process, once we receive an application for works, this first step is to consult with internal council stakeholders. And as part of this, Councillor Cook has been sent a copy of the East Rugby Union's application for works. Once Councillor Cook provides her feedback, council will assess the application. So there is no decision through you, Mr Chair. I might also add that East Rugby Union has an arrangement with Churchie to utilise the fields for the next cricket season, this 2021-22, and that works are continuing in this
Point of order,
respect.
Mr Chair.
Point of order to you, Councillor Cook.
Very interesting history, but did this knowledge influence the decision to kick the club out of their grounds?
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Howard, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr Chair. The answer is no. The answer is we've received the application for works just last week, which has just been.
Councillor Howard is answering the question. It was a long question. There was much to it, and Councillor Howard is answering it. Please allow her to do so. Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I don't know that they actually want to hear the answer. I think they're more interested in throwing barbs across the chamber. And it's a great shame, Mr Chair, because...
Councillor Cassidy, I'm hearing a low murmur from you, but it would be very loud, I suspect, to Councillor Howard, who's very close to you. Please allow her to answer the question that Councillor Cook asked. Councillor Howard.
So through you, Mr Chair, the East Rugby Union is the head tenant for the whole of CP Bottomley Park, and they've held that community lease over council land at 31 Halifax Street, Norman Park, and has been associated with the site for more than 50 years. The club has 4,000 members, of which 1,000 are juniors. Can I just say through you, Mr Chair, that this opportunity that has been afforded to Councillor Cook to have some input into what East Rugby Union are proposing is the proper way for local councillors to have their say on a local sports field. We're very much looking forward to hearing what Councillor Cook has to say about the proposed plans, and as I said, the application for works has been submitted. We will await all stakeholder input, and then a decision will be made. Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Hutton.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to the Chair of the Infrastructure Committee. Councillor McLaughlin, the Schrinner administration is currently upgrading a number of dangerous intersections across the city to make travel safer for all. Can you please update the chamber on the progress of some of these intersection transformations?
Councillor McLaughlin.
Well, thank you, Mr Chair, and through you, I thank Councillor Hutton for the question. I'm always pleased to have the opportunity to update the chamber and those listening or watching on YouTube about the progress of our infrastructure upgrades. All works that Council undertakes are to make our roads safer for walkers, for cyclists and for drivers, so we can all have confidence about how we choose to move around our city. One of the most recent projects to reach completion is the Black Spot project in Belmont. The Black Spot program funds several critical safety upgrades in Brisbane each year. This is a really important federally funded grant program that helps Council target the most dangerous intersections across the city. In the current financial year, we have been successful in receiving funding for 4 locations with a high number of serious crashes across the road network. TMR, Transport of Main Roads, assessed these locations and approved them for funding, which is provided by the Australian Government and flows through the state government to Council. The intersection of London Road and Stanborough Road in Belmont used to be a 4-way priority controlled intersection featuring 2 stop signs. Severe crashes were happening here because drivers on London Road were failing to give way to through traffic on Stanborough Road. This intersection has now been transformed into a roundabout, which is providing much more controlled and coordinated traffic flow and better visibility. This work took about 4 months and finished up in the last couple of weeks. I understand, Councillor Murphy, you've inspected and given your thumbs up to the roundabout, and I'm sure his community will also appreciate the outcome here. Mr Chair, in previous meetings I've given a number of updates on the intersection upgrades currently underway in Councillor Sree's ward, the Montague Road and Victoria Street improvements in West End. We started work at this location in October 2020 to install traffic lights with signalised crossings and new on-road cycling facilities and new footpaths. Although there were some wet weather delays, I'm glad to say we're very close to seeing this one wrapped up with practical completion expected in April. And for those who don't recognise the intersection by its street names, it's at the intersection of Aldi, West End, on one of the corners. The project is a real win for pedestrians in particular. Although there's a pedestrian refuge a little further down the road, signalised crossings were really needed here to prevent people taking chances walking across the intersection, which had previously very poor visibility. Mr Chair, I'm also pleased to report that April will see the start of construction on the Chelsea Road and Rickett Road intersection upgrade in Ransom, in Councillor Murphy's ward again. This project is jointly funded by Council through our Better Roads for Brisbane program, which is a joint $500 million commitment with the Australian Government through their Urban Congestion Fund to deliver safety and congestion improvements right across Brisbane. The Chelsea Road and Rickett Road intersection will transform the stop sign controlled intersection to a much safer traffic light intersection with signalised pedestrian and cyclist crossings. We're anticipating that we'll be able to finish the intersection upgrade by the end of the calendar year. The new Wakerley Bikeway will also be delivered at the same time through the Public and Active Transport program, which will allow cyclists and pedestrians to safely ride and walk along Rickett Road. Mr Chair, another Black Spot project also due to finish up in the coming days. The new traffic lights at the intersection of Ipswich Road and Ponsonby Street in Adderley will be operational by the end of the week, weather permitting. This intersection used to be controlled by give way and stop signage, and the significant volume of traffic on Ipswich Road was resulting in drivers making risky manoeuvres to access the side streets. Again, this work will have taken about 4 to 5 months to complete. Another safety improvement delivered for Ipswich Road. We also have black spot projects in the suburbs of Wacol and St Lucia that will be constructed this financial year. More broadly, other infrastructure projects that will kick off in the first half of 2021 include the Melton Road and Howes Road intersection, upgrade in Nunda, main construction works on the Norris Road upgrades, a pedestrian improvement upgrade for the Vulture Street East in East Brisbane, and main construction works on the replacement of the Gresham Street Bridge in Ashgrove. Wherever possible, Mr Chair, I'll update the Chamber on our great suite of safety upgrades, all of which are helping to make the Brisbane of tomorrow better than the Brisbane of today.
Further questions? Councillor Shree.
Thanks, Chair. My question's to the Lord Mayor. While the connectivity benefits of new inner-city footbridges are obvious, many residents have raised legitimate concerns about impacts to public green space.
noting that if a bridge landing takes up an area of public parkland, this must at least be offset by the creation of new parkland nearby, rather than just spending a comparatively small amount of money on extra furniture and landscaping within existing parks. If the preferred locations for new footbridges are likely to result in a loss of public green space, can you confirm that budget allocations, cost estimates and business cases for these projects will factor in the cost of creating new parkland in the local area to offset the loss?
The Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and through you, Councillor Sri, for the question. Look, this is something that we've discussed in person, and I'm very proud that we're out to consultation on the next two green bridges that we have put forward. So obviously Kangaroo Point, Breakfast Creek, well underway. We're in procurement with construction to start as early as this year on those exciting projects, and then we're doing further planning work when it comes to future green bridges as well, and two in particular that link in key destinations with West End to Toowong and West End to St Lucia. This is part of our agenda to increase connectivity across the city, to support public and active transport, and to connect parts of the city that do not have connections in a way that we know there is big demand for. And this is definitely the case when it comes to the green bridges that we're talking about at the moment and planning with the community on. Obviously, there's been a number of options put forward. There's been several options for each location put forward, and we do genuinely want to hear the community's feedback. I do think, though, that there is some significant overstating of somehow the claim that there's going to be a loss of green space. This is public infrastructure in public parks. This is what we're building here. It's like if you built a toilet block in a park saying, oh, there's a loss of green space there. This is public infrastructure we're building here. This is not some kind of private infrastructure. This is not something that will reduce the usability of a park, but indeed will increase the usability and connectivity, and in fact connect parts of green space that are currently not connected. So I dispute the idea that somehow a green bridge causes a loss of green space. What we're talking about here is maybe the footprint of a pylon of the bridge. So we're talking, you know, a few square metres of land here where a pylon will land on each side of the river, and a series of pathways that connect into it. Now, pathways, last time I checked, are infrastructure you would expect to see in a park. We would expect to see pathways. The area even under the bridge is still area that can be used by the public. So I think it's quite deceptive and misleading to suggest that this will create a loss of green space. I don't think that is the case, and that's certainly not the way I see it, because this is fundamentally sustainable infrastructure. This is fundamentally infrastructure that helps reduce traffic congestion and supports sustainable methods of travel. And, you know, yes, there will be views on where it should go. Yes, there will be some residents who don't want green bridges. I get that. But, you know, this is one of those cities where everyone can have their say, and it is a fantastic thing. But to suggest that a green bridge will cause a loss of green space, I think, is misleading. I think that's a misrepresentation of what these things will actually deliver. They'll deliver great benefits to the community, and I would be careful, Councillor Sri, in overplaying that component of the project, because we know that one of the things, unfortunately, we've seen time and time again with Green politicians is that because they will never ever be in government, certainly not in my lifetime, they can promise everything and they can say, oh, we would do that if we were in, but then when it actually comes to the decision-making point, I would hope that Councillor Sri would support green infrastructure. Just like I would hope he support green buildings as well. Just like I hope he would support green methods of travel and public transport improvements. So this is where the rubber hits the road, Councillor Sri, through you, Mr Chair. There's an opportunity to support a greener future for our city. but opposing green bridges is not a way to do that. So we shall see. We will obviously listen to the community's views. There will be decisions made on where the appropriate locations are, but this is infrastructure that enhances the city, infrastructure that enhances connectivity and sustainability and enhances the opportunities for people to use parkland on both sides of the river and have connections between both. So these are fantastic bits of infrastructure, and I look forward to working with the community to deliver them.
Further questions? Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mr Chair. My question is to the Chair of the Environment, Parks and Sustainability Committee, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Cunningham, in your committee report today is a petition from Di Farmer MP asking Council to hand back a parcel of land at Balmoral State High School to the state. For the benefit of the Chamber, can you outline Council's response to the petition and clarify any other public statements made in relation to this matter?
Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and through you, thanks to Councillor Davis for the question. Indeed, in today's EPS committee report, we'll have the petition response for Di Farmer's last-minute campaign to remove Balmoral Sports Park and return it to the Education Department. But where do we begin, Mr Chair? Well, as we know, when the LNP government was elected in 2012, they were left a basket case of an education department.
Councillors, please allow the answer to be heard in silence. Councillor Cunningham.
With a massive 300 million...
Councillor Cunningham, just as soon as I stop speaking is not an invitation for others to interject. Please allow the answer to be heard. Councillor Cunningham.
Well, we know that they were left a basket case of an education department with a massive $300 million maintenance backlog and crumbling facilities right across the state. Following lobbying from local residents and the local MP, Aaron Dillaway, in 2014, Council was appointed as trustee for one of Balmoral State High School's ovals, meaning the state saved money on field maintenance. At the time, the Courier Mail reported that the local councillor, then Councillor Sutton, had said the sports and recreational needs of the community were growing. Clearly, at the time, this was a good outcome for the community, and since then, the park has been available for use by residents. It's also been used by a number of community cricket clubs like Holland Park Junior Cricket and Bulimba Cricket Club. Then out of the blue, last year, we saw Di Farmer start a petition calling for Council to hand back the land to the state at, quote, zero cost. Well, Mr Chair, what Di Farmer failed to mention was that Council doesn't own the land to hand back. The state owns the land, and that never changed. But she didn't want to let her residents know that. What changed is that a school with land deemed to be surplus at the time had some land granted to Council as trustee for sport and recreation purposes. Council maintains this land, and we know that this field has had a number of seasonal licences over the years, providing much-needed inner-city green space for our local clubs, including cricket clubs. The petition was a desperate 11th-hour attempt by the Labor Party to create an issue out of nothing ahead of a state election. If the state really wanted to have a discussion on this, they could have started by writing to Council, maybe even picking up the phone. But instead, they engaged in a misleading Facebook post and petition. It was only after the LNP's candidate for Bulimba, Anthony Bishop, pointed out to residents that the state already owned the land and had full power to do what their petition called for, that we finally saw some communication from the state. I can just imagine the scrambling behind the scenes. Quick, who do we know in Minister Grace's office? Well, it took 2 days after Anthony Bishop called out Labor's hypocrisy and incompetence before they finally found someone in the Education Department to write to Council. The member has done her constituents and Balmoral State High School a great disservice by turning this into just another political game. She could have looked at the issue months earlier, but she chose to wait until the very end of her term to raise the issue with the Council via a hostile petition. Council, I'm very proud that Council has a no net loss policy when it comes to our green space, and I would hope that the community does not lose out in any future development of this land should the state revoke Council's trusteeship. This administration is often told that residents are calling for more parks. Well, here we have the Labor Party saying
that they think the Morningside ward has got enough parkland. No more parkland needed. In fact, they think there should be less. Indeed, we had the Leader of the Opposition admit in committee last week that it was a fait accompli and the state would be taking the land back regardless of the response. I do hope the state government will engage with residents soon about what it plans to build on this parkland. Since the matter was raised in chamber last year, Di Farmer has made some interesting comments to her constituents about the matter. Di Farmer has said that unless council agrees to transferring the land back, it will be, quote, a long and torturous legal process for the government to get it back. Mr Chair, this does not align with the legal advice that council has received. The minister does not need council to agree to the revocation. The minister may revoke all or part of the reserve if they determine it to be in the public interest.
Councillor Cunningham, your time has expired. Are there any further questions? Councillor Cassidy.
Well, thanks very much, Chair. My question is to the Chair of the Finance, Administration and Small Business Committee, Councillor Allen. In recent questions on notice, the Labor team asked how much money this LNP administration has spent on graphics and fly-through animations of big CBD projects like Victoria Park and the Brisbane Metro, and we got no response to those questions. We then asked the CEO directly, and the response we got was this, and I quote, "The request to identify conclusive costs associated with artist impressions and or animations on projects would take considerable time." So basically the LNP has spent so much money on promoting themselves and these inner city projects that they have lost count. It would be great if they spent these countless dollars on improving suburbs or actually getting on with these projects, Chair. So my question to Councillor Allen is, as the Finance Chair, can you tell us here today how much this LNP administration has wasted on artist impressions and fly-throughs of these inner-city projects?
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and I, through you, thank Councillor Cassidy for the question, but I think the whole notion of, or premise of his question is flawed in that he sort of seems to suggest that our communication activities with the residents of Brisbane are somehow pointless and worthless. And we know for a fact that the communications that this administration undertakes with the community are very well regarded. Now, whether that's publications that we send out to the community, whether it's features we put on our website, whether it's videos that depict some of our key projects, all of these have value to the residents of the city. So I think the sort of notion that this is not money well spent is inaccurate. I think that the community values these things. I think they're important because we're obviously spending a lot of money on some very significant projects for the benefit of this city, and it's important, where possible, that we depict what these type of services are going to look like. And the Metro fly-through, as Councillor Cassidy described, are key to this communication. And, you know, we have to put this information out, these videos out, to support the consultation that we're going to have with the community. If you walk into a meeting or a consultation with the residents and you've got a blank piece of paper, you cannot have a valuable consultation.
Point of order to you, Councillor Cassidy.
Yeah, the committee chair has been debating the question for his entire answer, but it was specifically about costs. So I get, you know, he's got commentary on what I said, but the question was about how much has been spent on these items.
I appreciate that. Councillor Allen has a great deal of time remaining in his answer, and he is addressing elements of your question.
Okay.
I'm confident.
Thank you, Mr Chair. So in the context of the amounts that are spent on these things, they're all budgeted through the various allocations within the budget. Any of the elements that are associated with Metro or other communication activities, for example, are included in the budget. After Councillor Cassidy, do you want to hear the question or not? Okay, so Mr Chair, these are all covered in the budget. The councillors in the information sessions after the budgets are handed down have an opportunity to ask questions about the costs and the usage of the costs that are embedded in the budget. So I think the opportunity is here for Councillor Cassidy to review the budget, perhaps review some of the answers from the information sessions, and his answers will be embedded in that. So thank you very much, Mr Chair.
Further questions? Councillor Huang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is to the Chair of the Finance, Administration and Small Business Committee, Councillor Allen. Councillor Allen, Council is rolling out an upgrade to 2 of our SES depots. Can you update Council on the Brisbane SES units and outline how these expansions will ensure our SES depots are prepared for the next potential disaster?
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Huang, for your question. Obviously, this morning's committee presentation about the Brisbane City SES units has been a catalyst for your question. The Brisbane City SES form an integral part of City's ability to cope with weather events and also support the efforts of certain state agencies, such as the police and fire services. The SES, as most would know, is a volunteer organisation which provides support to the community in times of emergency and disaster. I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with their bright orange uniforms, synonymous with the SES. Functions of the SES include providing damage repairs to areas of people's houses while they're still habitable during a storm, emergency sandbagging during floods, assisting Queensland Police with missing person and forensic searches, to name a few. With Brisbane City's SES units spread out across north, south, east and west, residents and businesses should be comforted knowing that these volunteers are strategically located to support our communities at a moment's notice. This is a significant operation, and I just want to put into perspective the size of our SES unit. There are 807 volunteers. These volunteers are broken into active, probationary and reserve. There is a further 700 people who are on the waiting list to join, which shows that the community certainly supports this service and wants to be engaged. The SES have 42 vehicles, including medium trucks, vans and utes, 7 ATVs and 11 flood boats. Our SES units are well resourced to carry out their important functions. On average, each year, SES volunteers will attend 538 tasks, of which 495 are storm-related, and then to assist the police and ambulance services with 43 tasks. As an interesting fact from the past, during the 2014 storm, there were 3,500 tasks undertaken by the SES. Being a volunteer isn't just about waiting for a call-up to assist. Volunteers are continually training and honing their skills. Generally, volunteers dedicate 1 night per week for about 2 to 3 hours and 1 weekend per month for a total of about 16 hours of training. In terms of a little update about a couple of the SES facilities, the Salisbury SES unit will be relocating to the Richlands depot as part of the South Western Group. Salisbury depot is closing due to Cross River Rail activity. With approximately 128 members as well as equipment transferring to Richlands depot, an extension is warranted. The Richlands SES extension project will construct and connect a new 7-bay garage, including storage facilities, to the existing garage. In total, more than 190 members and equipment will call the Richlands depot home. At present, the facility at Ascot is above capacity in storing new equipment due to the increase in team members. Additional equipment, including watercraft and vehicles, are required to support its operational needs. The Ascot SES carport extension project involves extending the existing caged carport and constructing an additional caged carport as well as associated concrete works. This expansion will accommodate the increase in vehicles and equipment and ensure the Ascot SES can successfully service and respond to the needs of the Brisbane area. I know the Lord Mayor and the whole council team are always appreciative of our SES units across the city and for all of those who volunteer. And whilst we may not want to have a visit from the SES, because typically it's when we're in need, we are nonetheless delighted that they can respond to these events when we need them. So, in summary, I'd like to thank the SES volunteers and obviously their families who allow them to go out every week and undertake their training. Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Cassidy.
Thanks very much, Chair. My question is once again to Councillor Allen, the Chair of the Finance Administration and Small Business Committee. Following on with the theme of refusing to be transparent with Brisbane residents, this LNP administration has repeatedly refused to reveal its intended rates hike for July. Rates were hiked, of course, in January and they will be increased again in July. And despite repeatedly asking for a previous suburb-by-suburb breakdown of both rises, the LNP has kept them secret. So my question to Councillor Allen, given that you have budgeted for revenue increases in the forward estimates of the current budget, just how bad is this second rates hike going to be?
Councillor Allen.
Well, thank you, Mr Chair, and through you, thank you, Councillor Cassidy, for the question. Now, we've had the discussion on rates in this chamber a few times in recent weeks, so I will go back and just provide a little bit of background. There was a rates increase in July 2020 that was outlined in the Lord Mayor's budget speech, and it's been evident on people's rates notices since then. But the rates increase for the first 2 quarters of this financial year was fully offset by the COVID's rebate, which the Lord Mayor also announced in the budget. In the first quarter of this calendar year, the rates are largely offset for many ratepayers, certainly in my case fully offset by the Kingston Smith Drive rebate. So in the context of this year, we will have one rates increase. That's obviously likely to be considered in the forthcoming budget. Councillor Cassidy is obviously keen to know the scale of that increase, but ultimately, we won't know that until we've finished the budget development process, and that's what we're doing right now. It would be remiss to even speculate on what that increase might be until we've had a chance to go through a very thorough process of considering what the city's revenues are likely to be, what the costs are going to be over coming years, and obviously in this environment where we're coming out of a very difficult economic environment off the back of COVID, it's made our budgeting efforts even more difficult and more complex than ever before. Certainly, while I haven't been in this place for a long time, I do know that this budget is probably going to be one of the most challenging that we've had in the past decade. And so, while I recognise that that Councillor Cassidy is keen to know what the increase is, I might remind him as to Labor's history with rate rises. When they were last in administration, they increased rates by 6% on 4 occasions. I mean, that's something this administration has never gone close to. And certainly, we've looked at, in recent years, we've had very modest rate increases, nothing like what they did when they were in administration. So, all I can say to the residents of Brisbane, we will continue to go through the budget development process diligently. We will look to minimise any rate increases, but obviously we have a big growing city to support, and that will need to be reflected in any rate increases. Thank you.
That concludes question time.
Point
of order, Councillor Cassidy.
Thanks very much, Chair. I move suspension of standing orders to enable me to move the following urgency motion, which I'll send through now, that Brisbane City Council reinstates curbside collection using the windfall highlighted in the quarterly financial report today.
Seconded. I have an urgency motion proposed by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Griffiths. It is being distributed to councillors at the moment. Councillor Cassidy, you have 3 minutes to urgency. Please wait 1 moment while we adjust your clock. Please proceed.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chair. This is urgent today because it has been revealed in the quarterly financial report that is before us today that this LNP administration can well and truly afford to bring back this vital community service, and what it confirms is that it could have afforded to continue it all along. And that's why I think we should be discussing this issue today before us. Chair, the net revenue for council in these papers is up a whopping $23 million. Revenue from development services is up $10 million. This is a huge windfall for this council. It even shows that rates and utility charges in that quarter are up as well. So while this Lord Mayor is basically printing money, he is cutting basic and vital services. Rates are going up, Chair, but services are going down. Now, this is urgent because we know that the Lord Mayor has been telling mistruths to Brisbane residents. And we need to fix this today, and we can do that as a chamber and set the record straight. We all have this information before us. He certainly could have afforded curbside collection all along in his budget.
Councillor Cassidy, many of your points are substantive. Can I please ask you to return your comments to the procedural matter at hand, please?
Of course, Chair. This is urgent for us to not only debate but decide on this today to reinstate curbside collection, because Brisbane streets are becoming dumping grounds. We've seen that from information released recently in questions on notice, and we've seen that over the last many months in other information released by this administration. Their own figures suggest that their decision to cut curbside collection has led directly to an increase in illegal dumping. So we know before us today that the papers are here today. This is fresh information, and we can act on this as a council chamber and reinstate this vital community service.
On the matter of urgency, all those who support urgency, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. No. The noes have it.
Division.
Division called by Councillor Cassidy.
Seconded.
Councillor Griffiths, please ring the bells. Councillors, we'll proceed to, we'll continue voting from our seats. All those in favour of the resolution, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. And those against, please say no and raise your hand. Aye. Clerks, please read the result when you're ready.
Mr Chair, the noes have it, the voting being 6 in favour and 19 against.
The noes have it. Councillors, will proceed to the reports. The Establishment and Coordination Committee report, please. The Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I move that the report of the Establishment and Coordination Committee meeting held on Monday 15th February 2021 be adopted.
Seconded.
It's been moved by the Lord Mayor, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, that the report of the Establishment and Coordination Committee meeting dated Monday the 15th of February 2021 be adopted. Is there any debate? The Lord Mayor.
Yes, there is. My microphone on? Yep. Yes, there is, Mr Chair. Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to, on behalf of all of us, welcome Councillor Cook back, and also our baby Arlo as well, who's ridiculously cute. It was great to see her in the chamber today. Moving forward, I did want to talk about the function that we had on Sunday here in City Hall, which many of our councillors were at, including Councillor Cumming, in relation to the COVID-19 direct assistance grants. It was a fantastic event here in the building, where we saw hundreds of representatives of local community, arts, culture and sporting organisations come together to give us the opportunity to thank them for their efforts during what has been an incredibly tough year that we've been through with COVID, with their difficulty in being able to raise funds, with a lot of things being shut down, and the COVID Direct-19 assistance program was able to support them at a critical time with the payment of grants of up to $10,000 to help them with the bills that were continuing to roll in, or with essential maintenance jobs. And so we saw more than 300 different organisations benefiting from that, and we also saw around 158 different maintenance projects that were able to be provided as well. And as I was talking to the attendees, and as I mentioned, these are from the community organisations, sporting and cultural organisations right across the city in every ward. After the official part of the event had finished, it was just incredible to hear all of the stories of how that targeted funding at the right time had made a difference in their organisation. And it's interesting because we heard Labor bagging this program out. As they do, they just oppose everything. But from the perspective of these organisations, it was money at the right time to help them through at a critical time. And there was a great level of appreciation for the support that Council was able to provide, and in particular the fact that this funding was turned around very quickly. And in most cases we were aiming to try and get, once we'd received an application and it was determined to be a compliant application, the money was paid usually within a week. And that was a great outcome, so that they got the funds quickly to support their organisations. And so there was story after story coming from those organisations about how that targeted funding had helped during a critical time. Obviously, we'll continue to work with those organisations to make sure that we see them through, but things are looking up this year, and there was a great level of excitement in the room about how things are getting reactivated again, and whether that's sporting, cultural activities, the arts, and other community organisations. Even things like C&K Community Kindies were represented there as well. So it was a great outcome, and you can be assured, all councillors, that the program that was introduced in the budget last year made a very big difference where it mattered at the right time. I did want to just refer to the issue that was on everyone's lips in the last week, and that's the issue of Facebook. And obviously it's impacted on many different organisations, including Brisbane City Council, having we all woke up that morning to see that our website had been, our Facebook page had been taken off, and we discovered quickly that we were not the only ones, and so there were many organisations that were impacted, and I very clearly spoke out at the time. This is not the way to win friends and influence people. This is not the way to conduct a negotiation, by bullying a whole range of organisations, and that we should absolutely support the right of journalists and the organisations that they work for to be funded for the news that they produce. This is something we should all support. We have seen community newspapers closing down and going online, and we have seen that big move to online, and for an organisation like Facebook then to put the sharing of that news in jeopardy, even though I have to say the sharing of that news on their site generates massive traffic and therefore massive revenue for them indirectly. It is something that was obviously a shock to all of us. We made the decision then very quickly to make sure that we stop as an organisation any kind of advertising on Facebook, and that stoppage has continued. I do see today that Facebook has issued a statement saying that they're close to reaching an agreement with the federal government on this. I always knew that there would be some kind of agreement reached. We'll be interested to see the details of that agreement, and hopefully it is one that supports quality journalism and the production of quality news for our community, because that is something that we all support, and that I know we'll get a good outcome if that occurs. But credit to the government for standing strong. There are not too many governments that have the guts to take on a multinational like Facebook, and so it was the right thing to do, and I hope we get the right outcome here that supports the production of quality news for our community. I just did want to say that as an aside though, it was interesting because Facebook, through their algorithms, took down news sites, and as we were looking through all the news sites that disappeared off their Facebook page, there was one so-called news site that escaped Facebook's attention, and that was the Brisbane Now fake news site. So even Mark Zuckerberg knows that this is not real news, this is just fake news, and he's like, yeah, no problem there, that's just fake news. That's not real news, that's fake news, so Brisbane Now, that can stay up, no problem. Meanwhile, Well, I must be the only one because no one else reads that rubbish. But look, you know, it's something that sticks in my craw that they actually claim that this is some kind of legitimate news source when we've got legitimate journalists right here in the chamber covering council, and they do a fantastic job. They don't always say nice things about us, but that's the nature of the news. And so Labor's fake news didn't fool Facebook. Facebook knew that it was fake news, and so the fake news site on Facebook continued. I also did want to cover, when it comes to the quarterly financial report, which is in front of us, a little bit more fake news that Labor is trying to get out there. And we heard the terms that Councillor Cassidy used before, Mr Chair, that we had somehow received a windfall. A windfall. Okay, that's interesting terminology. So according to Councillor Cassidy, he's been going out there saying, oh, the budget's shot. Shocking financial management, the budget's, everything's rubbish. This is what he says. And then he's like, oh, but we've got a windfall. So first of all, that's counterintuitive. But let's actually have a look at what he was talking about. There are only two potential items that I think he could be referring to. One of them, Mr Chair, was an early payment of a CBIC dividend. Now, that's not a windfall because we were expecting that anyway, but every dollar of that goes to the Green Future Fund. Not to curbside collection or anything else, but to the Green Future Fund, which is what I made the commitment to the people of Brisbane would happen. When we get dividends in from CBIC, it goes to the Green Future Fund to enhance and expand our parks and green space for the community of Brisbane. And that is a priority. It will remain a priority. The only other thing that he could potentially be referring to is infrastructure charges, because he has mentioned in his public misstatements about all this extra money coming in from developers. Now, developers are required to pay infrastructure charges when they go ahead with developments, and as they should. But to suggest that somehow council is flush with cash from this is a complete misrepresentation of the reality. Let me go through the actual figures about infrastructure charges in recent years. So far to date, year to date in this financial year, so we're approaching the end of February, there have been around $35 million in infrastructure charges paid. Now, yes, that's a lot of money, but listen to how much has been paid in previous years. Last year, $94 million. The year before, $99 million. The year before that, $133 million. And the year before
Lord Mayor,
that...
your time has expired.
Move for an extension. Seconded.
An extension of time proposed by Councillor Adams, seconded by Councillor Landers. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Lord Mayor, you have a further 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Chair. And the year before that, $176 million. So let me go through those again. So if you go back a few years, that last number I mentioned, $176 million in 1 year. This year, $35 million. That is down significantly by any measure. By any measure. So to suggest that somehow it's a windfall is rubbish. We are down significantly. And this is where you see the impacts of economic conditions, building conditions, the construction industry, the property industry flowing through to council. And this is exactly why there are impacts on our budget, because there's a whole range of activity out there in the community and in the economy that is down, and this is certainly one of those areas. So to suggest we're having a windfall is just absolutely fake news and misleading. We no doubt will hear from Labor councillors, as I said, that they'll claim that the budget is in some kind of terrible situation. But I think really you need to start looking at page 4, where, and this appears in every financial report, where you look at the ratios, and it talks about council's performance for the period ending 25th of December 2020. This is a snapshot of a quarter, 1 quarter in a year. And we set ourselves, and there's those targets are actually endorsed and assessed by other agencies as well, external to us, including Queensland government agencies, targets for various financial ratios. And every single one of those targets has been met. Yet you'll hear Labor say, oh, the budget's in a terrible position. We pride ourselves on responsible financial management. We also pride ourselves on running a balanced budget, which includes a small surplus. Now, why do we have a small surplus? Because we know there will be unexpected things happening during the year that we need a buffer zone for. Why don't we have a big surplus? We don't have a big surplus because we want to inject that money back into the economy, back into projects across the city. So we have traditionally run a balanced budget with a small surplus, and that is our approach going forward. That's what we always seek to achieve. It has been incredibly difficult in recent times, incredibly difficult, particularly given that our incomes have been down by more than $180 million, including what I referred to before with infrastructure charges and various other revenue coming in that is down. But the budget is meeting all of its targets from financial ratio point of view, and you will not find a better set of numbers anywhere in the country, in particular in George Street. You certainly won't find one there. And so we'll hear a lecture from Labor about financial management and the budget, but that's like hearing a lecture from Dracula about why he wants to get his hands on the blood bank, basically. So he will also, Labor councillors will also talk about projects being delayed, but they won't tell you about all the projects that are ahead of schedule. They won't tell you about that. They'll be very selective in what they talk about. They will not talk about, for example, the almost $3 million for Metro, where we're actually ahead of schedule with Metro and accelerating the project. They won't tell you about the $13 million accelerated expenditure in the major bikeways and suburban enhancement funds projects, where we're powering ahead with important projects. They won't tell you either, Mr. Chair, about the fantastic work being done right across the city in so many areas, like, for example, the accelerated expenditure in the Indooroopilly roundabout upgrade, Newman Road and Wecker Road, and the Rochedale and Priestdale Road projects, where we're ahead by $2.4 million. They will not tell you about this, because they talk about a windfall, but they will not tell you that we collected $2.7 million less in parking penalty infringements than what we anticipated. And they will not tell you that we collected $4.2 million less for on-street parking and our parking stations. Apparently that doesn't fit with their narrative of being in a windfall. Just be very careful about what Labor says, because they're only telling you ever part of the story here. Because we are in challenging times, but we have worked very hard to manage this situation responsibly and to make sure that wherever possible we fast-track projects and move ahead. I'm very proud that we're continuing to support our community and build infrastructure and create a cleaner and greener Brisbane through the great range of projects that we're doing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further speakers? Councillor Cassidy.
Oh, thanks very much, Chair. I'll speak on both of these items before us today, and just ask at the outset that they be taken seriatim for voting purposes, please.
Seriatim for voting?
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Please proceed.
What's the saying? I think, what was it? The Lord Mayor doth protest too much. I think when he spends 15 or 18 minutes or whatever it is, Chair, talking about Labor. The entire time he's talking about us instead of talking about his record and what is before us today in these papers. And I think we all know the reason for that, because he hit the nail on the head when he said that this budget is in a shambles. And we would say that because, of course, that is true. This would have to be, Chair, one of the most damning financial reports that we've had before us in a long, long time when it comes to quarterly financial reports. And it exposes what this Lord Mayor and this LNP administration are really, truly for, and who they are really and truly for. and particularly at a time when we should be all pulling in the one direction. As we came through COVID and emerged on the other side largely here in Brisbane, the community came together and they all pulled in the same direction. And they would have expected that they had a council administration and a Lord Mayor that was there to support them. But what is before us today is a pretty damning indictment. Not a single line item in this budget, Chair, is now on track, and we have seen a huge surge in rates and a $23 million windfall in council's pocket. And that is the reality. The Lord Mayor mightn't like it. He was protesting a lot just then at using that term, but it's the truth. It's what's before us today. And there's also an unexpected $10 million boost from development. And we know the changes this administration have brought in recently in terms of billing out council officers at exorbitant rates. And we've seen, as a result, this huge $10 million boost from development. Now, this is all extra revenue that the administration didn't think they would have, and yet the Lord Mayor continues to tell the people of Brisbane that council can't afford curbside collection. He continues to say time and time again that council is so hard up and we have so little money coming in that this administration can't afford curbside collection. He also says they can't afford to do ferry terminal upgrades, but can somehow afford a $133 million acquisition of a bus depot. So it's all about financial management, Chair, which they're doing poorly, and it's all about priorities, and we know their priorities are all wrong. It's clear the excuse of not being able to afford it is a complete and utter fabrication, Chair. Lord Mayor Schrinner can find the money when it suits him, and he usually finds it for himself. Now, the Lord Mayor's economic recovery plan is appalling. We didn't hear him talk about that in his opening remarks, Chair, and I think I know why. Because when the council should be stepping up and working alongside the people of Brisbane, we're seeing projects fall behind and fall behind bad. There's a $2.2 million delay in the Economic Recovery Task Force and a $1.5 million delay in those projects that go alongside that. So much for the grand economic recovery that this Lord Mayor touted that his Economic Recovery Task Force would be. Now, it seems to me, Chair, that the ducks of economics at school does not cut it when it comes to running a city. He is also heavily neglected in our suburbs. Now, bear with me, Chair, this is a very long list. There's a $6 million delay to park projects. Library upgrades are delayed by $1.4 million. City cleansing and street sweeping by $1.1 million. Sports field and hard court works by $1.6 million. A $3.4 million delay for community facility works and maintenance, and close to $800,000 delayed in public pool upgrades and maintenance. In a year when La Nina hit, there was also a $3 million delay in stormwater and drainage projects, despite a $21 million windfall in contributed drainage assets as a result of development. This absolutely blows my mind, Chair, and every LNP councillor in this place should hang their heads in shame. There's a $260,000 underspend on the mosquito and pest services line item as well. So there's 260,000 reasons why Brisbane residents can't trust this Lord Mayor with their money and their health and safety. Now, with the LNP in charge, Chair, this council doesn't do what a council is supposed to do. Local governments get paid by their residents to maintain a city, look after roads, rates and rubbish, and do what their community wants and needs. But this Lord Mayor is upping rates. He's cutting rubbish collection services and letting footpaths and roads deteriorate. But guess what's never delayed, Chair? One thing that's never delayed, never cut or never cancelled, and that's council advertising like the Living in Brisbane newsletter that we see each and every month, without fail, with the Lord Mayor's face all over the front of it, getting bigger and bigger, every edition, stuffed into letterboxes all around the city, costing residents millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars each and every year. Millions that could and should be spent on shovel-ready projects to get this economy firing again here in Brisbane and supporting the community. Now, Chair, I think the Lord Mayor must be wearing glasses with mirrors on the inside of those lenses sometimes, because his only vision for Brisbane is a vision of himself. Now, I'm pretty sure I know which room in this vast City Hall is his favourite. I'm sure it's the gold mirror room up in his office, because his focus is fairly and squarely on him rather than the residents of Brisbane. Now, smart leaders around the world, those who actually have a vision for their cities, are busy doing everything they can during this pandemic to ensure that their cities come out greater than before. This report proves that Adrian Schrinner has no plan for our economy. He cuts basic services, he neglects our suburbs, he ignores residents, and he spends millions of dollars advertising himself. We'll be lucky if Brisbane just scrapes through this economic crisis under Adrian Schrinner's watch, Chair. On the Brisbane Metro project, something that Lord Mayor didn't touch on too much there, the item B before us today, another week goes by and more evidence that this project is being handled very incompetently by this administration. If the proper planning was done in the first place, we wouldn't have these issues. If this busway extension was announced as it was, a busway extension, and planned as such, these setbacks and legal challenges and extra costs certainly wouldn't be inflicted on the people of Brisbane, and that's what we're seeing here in Clause B, another dispute. If I think the Lord Mayor put as much effort into this project and planning this project properly as he did promoting himself and promoting the project and paying for those glossy artist's impressions, this busway extension might actually be underway by now and seriously underway. But instead, what we've got, of course, is a lot of fly-through videos, a lot of glossy brochures, a lot of cost blowouts, a lot of time delays, a lot of disputes, a lot of secret amounts of money being wasted, Chair. So this is a very, very disappointing outcome for the people of Brisbane.
Further speakers? Further speakers? There being none, Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. I just rise to speak briefly about item B, the Brisbane Metro rejection of claim of compensation for 37 School Road, Rochdale. This is an item that's very similar to last week's item. It's part of the Metro project. We acquired this land in Rochdale because we need the site for the new Metro vehicle depot. This is one of 8 properties that Council requires for the depot. We resumed this property in particular on the 11th of September 2020. It has an area of 1.9 hectares, and at that time it was being utilised as a small crop farm, one of the very few still functioning farms left in the Brisbane City Council limits. This 10-hectare site, the total site of the depot, will house the eventual fleet of 60 Metro vehicles and will be complete by 2023. We know that high-level options originally assessed School Road, Rochdale as the preferred Metro depot site after Cross River Rail decided that it would take the balance of the former GoPrint site in Woolloongabba for their tunnel project. Subsequent to acquisition of the properties, Council has undertaken an analysis for the future needs of the Metro service and decided to take additional land, which would increase our ability to service more vehicles and provide us the flexibility for expansion of the fleet in the future. This, of course, will provide power for all of our electric vehicles and a 1.1 megawatt solar plant, which will be the largest installed solar capacity in Council's current solar fleet. So it'll be a very significant depot. We know that last week Council awarded the design and construction contract for construction of the depot to Adco Constructions. They are based on Brisbane and the Gold Coast, and they will employ local people through the design and construction phase of the depot, which was due to start midway through this year. And we had a couple of glib lines from Councillor Cassidy, which really aren't worth responding to, but I do note that Councillor Cassidy did say that the Lord Mayor was looking at things through his glasses. I'm not sure about you, Chair, but the Lord Mayor doesn't wear glasses, so I don't know what glasses he's talking about there. He also mentioned that the project we wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for, if he was in and he'd done proper planning. Look, I don't know what kind of project that Councillor Cassidy would run, but I would say to you respectfully, Councillor Chair, that it would be very difficult to run a project like Metro without property resumptions being a part of that. And one of the inevitable realities of property resumptions is that people generally think their property is worth more than what council assesses it at, and invariably we land at a value somewhere between what the person thinks their property is worth and what council thinks their property is worth. That is literally the art of resumptions. It happens all across council, across state government, across the federal government. It's never been any different since time immemorial. So if Councillor Cassidy has a new and different, exciting way that he would perform property resumptions, then I'm sure we would be all ears. We'd love to hear it. We know that he and Wayne Swan have regular catch-ups and discussions about all things related to economics. We know Councillor Cassidy has in fact come into this council chamber and claimed that he is the Dux of economics. So I would be very interested to hear it, and maybe one of his colleagues will get up in this debate and tell us what this new plan for fixing land resumptions would be.
Further speakers? Further speakers? Councillor Johnston.
Thank you. Councillor Shree just told me he was Dux at his school. Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. Anyway. No.
All right. Interesting aside, but back on the topic, please.
Thank you. Oh, no, I think that's something to be proud of. Come on. Look, just briefly on item A, the annual operational plan progress and quarterly financial report. I did listen to Councillor Allen a little bit earlier today, and I absolutely understand his dilemma. And I think he referred to the upcoming budget as one of the most challenging that there'd be. And I can completely see why. He's been the finance chairperson now for 2-3 years? Two, I think, yep. And yes, he's inherited a lot of problems from the people sitting directly in front of him, particularly the Deputy Mayor, but also the Lord Mayor. It's only getting worse under this LNP administration's management. Now, they're quick to point to the big projects, they're quick to re-announce projects over and over again, but the big problem with this budget and this report is it is held together with a bit of sticky tape and blue tack. This report shows us that council has received huge amounts of extra money from the federal government, huge amounts of extra funding from developers, and yet just about every kind of essential daily operation, whether it's parks projects or sports fields or whatever, is behind schedule, is underspent. So they've had more money in than they had expected, but they've been unable to deliver on their program as they promised. Now, this is not a new phenomenon. This is what's been going on for years and years and years. And every key indicator, every quarter that they miss, we get to the end of the financial year and then half these projects are rolled over, re-announced and form part of the next budget. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, hundreds of millions of dollars are being moved around and into programs and projects that have had no public scrutiny, that there's been no consultation with at the macro level, this council, in determining priorities, and it is wrong. It is wrong. The way in which this council is managing the finances of Brisbane ratepayers is incompetent, it is unfortunate, it is inappropriate, and it has to stop. This administration is wasting millions of dollars and we are not seeing the outcomes on the ground. I am incredibly concerned about what I've read in these papers. You know, when we did debate the Sherwood Bus Depot last year, for example, I just expressed incredulity about that. You know, yes, we bought that land, then we sold that land, then we leased it back. Guess what? We're buying that land again, and here it is in the budget papers, almost $132 million. This is the second time we've bought it. Do you know what I could do with $132 million in my ward? Pretty much every project I've ever wanted to do. Put the backflow valves in, I'd put them in all over the city. Fix up the parks, fix up a few road projects, get some better pedestrian and cycling facilities in. And I'd probably have enough left over to give some to every other councillor in the place as well. But no, this administration has chosen, first time round, a financial transaction that wasn't in the best interests of the city, and now it's doing a second financial transaction that's not in the best interests of the city. It's just costing us money. And no doubt there'll be some weirdo back-end financial deal done again off the back of this bus depot acquisition. And do we see that money, do we see that actual ratepayers' money, $132 million, being made available to build a footpath to the Sherwood bus depot that people could walk on? No. Is it going into any kind of local project in my ward? No, it's not. So this administration does not have its priorities right. They are dripping in money, unexpected money that they've got either from the federal government or developers. They are fundamentally unable to manage the delivery of their program. It's not my program, it's their program. They're supposed to be experienced financial managers, but that's not what we're seeing in the delivery of how this council operates. And we are seeing big ticket items in the budget that are having adverse impacts on the delivery of essential services in local communities. It is wrong. This administration is going in the wrong direction. It is not a good financial manager. And I think that the finance chairs historically and today, Councillor Allan, are not serving this city in the way it should be served.
Further speakers? Councillor Allan.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I rise to speak on item A, the annual operational plan progress and the quarterly financial report for December 2020. The annual operational plan progress and quarterly financial reports reflect Council's financial results for the period ended the 25th of December 2020 in relation to Council's budget and records variances in the delivery of the 2021 annual operational plan. And at the risk of repeating something that's been repeated in this chamber many times over recent years, this is a point-in-time report. It's halfway through the financial year. As is often the case with projects, we do the design and planning work in the first half and delivery in the second, and that often means that at December, the spend is below the target for the full year, not surprisingly. So the report shows the budget position for the year until December 2020, taking into consideration any changes that were made in the second budget review. In addition, this report gives an overview of the commercial operations and financial wellbeing of Council's business activities. Any financial changes reported that are permanent and require a change in the budget are dealt with through the budget review process. All differences in the final annual operational plan progress and quarterly financial report for each year are considered permanent. In terms of Council's performance against key financial ratios and targets, as the Lord Mayor suggested earlier, these are all within the targeted range. Not only does this demonstrate effective management of the financial risks, it also goes to the heart of this administration's strong focus on sound financial management. We all know that the COVID effects are being felt across the wider economy, with ramifications still occurring through many business sectors. While there are some positive signs emerging, it is likely that economic activity in many sectors will remain subdued for the foreseeable future. From a council perspective, the flow-on effects of COVID have resulted in project delays, decreased revenues and increased cost. COVID has had a very real impact. In terms of some specific areas of interest, the Lord Mayor touched upon the increase in discounts and rebates due to the special COVID-19 rebate, and that equated to $18.6 million. We continued to experience a decrease in developer contributions, and this is largely due to a lower level of developer activities in the current period. In the statement of financial position, comparing the current period to June 2020, there was an increase in cash and cash equivalents due to net cash generated from operations, receipt of capital contributions, donations, grants and subsidies of $100.1 million and proceeds from disposal of capital assets. You'll note that we had a very slight increase overall in property, plant and equipment due to increases in capital expenditure, non-developer donated assets and asset upgrades for service concession assets. Key projects in this category included the Sherwood Bus Depot acquisition, roads network resurfacing and Brisbane Metro, to name a few. When comparing the current period statement of cash flows against the prior period's actuals, you'll note an increase in the dividends and participation returns due to the timing of the CBIC 2019-2020 dividend, which was received in 2020, and that was in the order of $23 million. And as the Lord Mayor advised, this goes towards supporting the city's sports, parks and green spaces. Now, I will touch upon a couple of items in Program 8 specifically. In city governance, the quarterly reports show movements in the budget as a result of increased revenues, rephasing and delays in some projects due to COVID. Of note, we've seen revenues of $5.8 million receipted earlier than anticipated from QIC and urban utilities tax. Additionally, there is a $9.4 million favourable expense variation as a result of higher than anticipated imputed income tax, lower than anticipated bank charges and rephased expenditure in the Revenue Channel Management Improvement Project. This variance is partly offset by the phasing of corporate cost allocations to projects. On the whole, we've seen an increase in actual revenues to the tune of $8.2 million when compared to the year-to-date budget. Additionally, expenses are currently tracking lower than the year-to-date budget. So turning to the annual plan implementation variances, you'll note the variance in the timing of the delivery of our agreement outcome. So our agreement was formerly known as the EBA. It's been delayed due to unresolved claims by 2 unions. I would note that the agreement is supported by the 9 other unions. The draft agreement had in principle support in October 2020. However, at the 11th hour, the RTBU and Professionals Australia stated their differences with some matters. In the RTBU's case, a matter which has been supported by them for the past 15 years through previous agreements. Several conciliation conferences have been held since November. However, disappointingly, no resolution was found. Without the agreement of all parties, neither the RTBU or Professionals Australia matters can be referred to arbitration until the 7th of April, some 6 months after the expiration of the current agreement. So early arbitration is not supported by all unions, and therefore that will not occur until that date in April. Now, I did want to touch upon a couple of things that Councillor Cassidy raised. And first of all, at the very commencement of his speech, he indicated that the Lord Mayor had said the budget was in a shambles. Now, I'm going to go back through the minutes of this meeting, and I'm sure he didn't state that, but a couple of points I did want to touch upon was referencing the Economic Recovery Task Force and the fact that we are still to spend $2.2 million. Now, I would note this was as at the end of December. I can assure Councillor Cassidy that the funds that have been allocated to the Economic Recovery Task Force will definitely be fully expended by the end of the financial year. A number of the projects that we've instituted with that funding were very much in the design phase in the first half of the year, and delivery will occur in the second half. So rest assured, Councillor Cassidy, that money will be spent. He spoke of the $23 million windfall. Now, as the Lord Mayor indicated, this is just the CBIC dividends coming through. No windfall there. We estimate every year what we think we're going to receive in dividends from CBIC, and so it was certainly no windfall or surprise to us. He's indicated that there is a boost in
Councillor Allen. I hear a lot of secondary conversations going on. There's at least 3. If you want to have a private conversation, please take it to the antechamber. Councillor Allen.
So he indicated that there's been some significant boost in rates in the half year. That's just not accurate. I just don't know where he gets this from. It's worth bearing in mind that we had the COVID-19 rebate in the first half of the year. We had the job seeker rebate. We had the first homeowners rebate. So, we've certainly done a lot to support ratepayers in this city. And when you actually look at the numbers and compare year to year, there's a $1 million difference in a $3.15 billion budget. It's extraordinary that he would think that constitutes some massive boost in rates revenue. I won't touch upon the rest. There were quite a number of items that he raised during his speech, but virtually all of them had no substance to them, or they were just a complete misinterpretation of the financial figures before him. Thank you.
Further speakers? Further speakers? There being none, and the Lord Mayor is absent from the room, we'll proceed to a vote immediately. All those in favour of item A, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. No. The ayes have it. Division called by Councillor Strunk and Councillor Cumming. Please ring the bells. Councillors, all those in favour of item A, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. And all those against item A, please say no and raise your hand. No. Clerks, please read the results.
Mr Chair, the ayes have it, the voting being 19 in favour and 6 against.
The ayes have it. On item B, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And those against, please say no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. We'll now proceed to the City Planning
Point of order,
report.
Chair.
Point of order to you, Councillor Landers.
Mr Chair, I move that Council now adjourn for afternoon tea for 15 minutes, which commences only when all councillors have vacated the chamber and the doors have been locked.
Seconded.
It's been moved by Councillor Landers, seconded by Councillor Hutton. This council now adjourn for the purpose of afternoon tea for a period of 15 minutes, commencing when all councillors have vacated the chamber and the doors have been locked. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And those against, please say no. The ayes have it. We'll see you in 15 minutes. Look, this is no different from any other week. Yeah. I suspect this position is warmer than other positions in the room. Yeah. I know. Look. All right, quorum is, we have quorum. Councillors, the City Planning and Economic Development Committee, please.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I move that the report of the City Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting held on Tuesday the 16th of February 2021 be adopted.
Second that.
It's been moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Hammond. The report of the City Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting dated Tuesday the 16th of February 2021 be adopted. Is there any debate? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Mr Chair. This morning's committee was around the Brisbane Business Hub, but as I've promised each week, what's coming up this week? We've got preparing for post-JobKeeper. BDO is holding that workshop on the 24th from 9 a.m. for 2 hours. Then we've got motivating and managing teams in 2021, learning from the experts in understanding team culture and changes in work environments. That's on the 24th from 3 to 5 by Better Health Generation. Commonwealth Bank Australia is doing an introduction to cyber security. It's a virtual one from 11 a.m, ironically, for cyber security, on the 26th, about basic challenges, traps and the impacts to small businesses. And on the 2nd of March, strategy to action. Put a strategy in place and develop a business action plan with Growy, one of our major business expert partners. So again, great workshops coming up this week. Let your community know if they may be interested in that at businessinbrisbane.com.au. Last week's presentation was on positive public realm outcomes as part of development applications. What we have been seeing over the last 12 to 24 months is some fantastic examples of projects, usually within the inner 5K radius of the CBD, producing fantastic outcomes at the ground plane level or above as well, off their own bat. So it's notable that these are outcomes that the developer wanted to do from the outset and at their own cost. They haven't been conditioned as trunk works.
Councillors, please allow the speaker to be heard in silence. Councillor Adams.
They just understand the value of having great places for not only their residents, because that's where they live, to relax, but also visitors to enjoy, particularly if they've got commercial or retail on the ground plane as well. So the sites we talked about last week were Fish Lane and Town Square in South Brisbane, 23 High Street in Toowong called the Avery, 57 Coronation Drive in the CBD, and 144 Logan Road in Woolloongabba at South City Square. The Town Square application at Fish Lane is completed, and it is absolutely spectacular. The outcome we've seen here is where we had 40 concrete parks underneath the railway line is now a completely public open space with subtropical plantings. There is over 400 square metres of publicly available open space with 3,000 plants. At 57 Coronation Drive, there were 2 buildings that were approved. One building was 30 stories and the other building was 35 stories, in a significantly lower code accessible range for these heights. But we see the concession on height for these projects with such a large public benefit as being a great outcome for the residents of Brisbane, something that this administration is more than happy to entertain if we get the great outcome from the community. In fact, we encourage it because this means that when there's a new building that is proposed, if the performance outcomes are involved, we expect there to be significant public benefit associated with them as well. Be this local street upgrades or newly created, privately funded but publicly available open space. It's a great outcome for the residents of Brisbane. An example of this in Councillor Mackay's ward in High Street in Toowong was approved in October last year, and this has got an over 3,000 square metres of public plaza space. It is going to revitalise that Toowong Village area out of sight. It includes new spaces to sit, water features, plenty of landscaping, places to meet, to greet and just to relax. And the fourth one we mentioned was South City Square, which was approved in December last year. Again, an application including a large central green space acting as an urban park. The frontage of the development has a series of entry points on a pretty major road at Logan Road that has several terraces and plazas and shared vehicle zones. What these applications show is that privately funded but publicly available open space and upgrades is encouraged in Brisbane. In turn, they help build communities and provide places to relax and spend time in the inner city. We are the capital city of Queensland. We should be encouraging buildings of this calibre, especially within our higher density areas where increased height is generally expected. And I encourage the building and construction industry to think outside the box and make sure that the Brisbane of tomorrow is even better than the Brisbane of today. We also had a petition before us, I'll leave to the chambers, around a childcare centre in Manly, which is still being assessed, and the manager, of course, will review all the submissions before they proceed with the outcome there. Thank you.
Further speakers? Councillor Sri.
Thanks, Chair. I rise to speak on the committee report as well, and I want to offer the following comments, not as a direct criticism of the administration, but in the hopes that the Deputy Mayor will, and perhaps some of the other chairs will genuinely engage with this perspective. I think reasonable people can disagree on this issue, but I think I hope that through you, Chair, Councillor Adams won't just dismiss these comments as being the ravings of some crazy greenie, and will actually take them on board and reflect on them. I have two broad concerns about some of the deals council has done in the past regarding publicly accessible, privately owned spaces. And the first one is just around the net value to the community relative to what we're giving the developer, because often what we're giving the developer is significantly increased height and density. And I guess the concern I hear repeatedly from residents is that while that new little green space at the front of West Village or that new green space over in Toowong might look nice, it doesn't really meet the area's needs in terms of how much new parkland we need to meet the needs of a growing population. And so they're nice, they're often of a reasonably high quality, they're often good for sort of various uses, but they're not actually meeting the needs of our area. And when you combine that with the fact that there's a rapid increase in dramatic increase in population associated with those new developments being approved, sometimes they can actually represent a step backwards. And I think we saw that with West Village and perhaps also arguably with South City Square, where developers have been allowed so much increased density on those sites that places even more strain on existing local green spaces and public spaces than is offset by the creation of the new public space or publicly accessible, privately owned space. I hope that makes sense through you, Chair, to Councillor Adams. I think, as I said, reasonable people can disagree and there's a balance to be struck, but I would respectfully suggest that we haven't necessarily struck the right balance in recent years. And in fact, there's been wild divergence in terms of how much land council is willing to, or how much height council is willing to trade off in terms of a given amount of land. And we see that at the moment with two proposals in my ward. There's a quote-unquote green building proposed down on Merivale Street, which is incredibly car-centric. It's not at all sustainable typology of building. It's actually very unsustainable for a range of reasons. And it's proposing a very small, publicly accessible, privately owned space, basically underneath the building awnings at ground level. And in contrast, there's a proposal for 297 Montague Road, which is actually proposing to hand over 4,000 square metres of parkland back to the public in exchange for increased height. So with both of those proposals, developers are asking for exemptions to the height limit to build something 22, 26-storey towers on sites zoned for around 12 storeys. But what they're offering to council is very, very different. And it seems that often these benefits in terms of, oh, great, we're getting this new public square or town square or plaza or whatever, they're not directly quantified. We know that the developer is getting a massive increase in real estate value. For each story that council approves the developer to build above the acceptable height outcome, there's a significant increase in profitability for the developer. They're getting more real estate. It's kind of like handing them over another block of land. You're handing them over more vertical real estate that they can develop and sell. So the developer is, in some cases, getting hundreds of millions of dollars of additional vertical airspace and real estate that they can commodify, and the community gets a tiny, dinky little public plaza in exchange. And that's not necessarily a good deal. And I want to draw Councillor Adams' attention to the desired standards of service in Part 4 of City Plan, and just point to this document as perhaps a good spot to look to when trying to evaluate whether the proposed public benefit of one of these public plazas justifies the increase in height. Because what you see in that desired standards of service is that in a local area, for every 1,000 residents, there should be 0.8 hectares of public parkland per person. So for every 1,000 residents, there should be 0.8 of a hectare, and then there's other figures there for 0.6 hectares of natural recreation space, 1.2 hectares of sport recreation space. The point here is that for the number of residents in the area, council is supposed to have a certain amount of parkland. That's in your own LGIP and desired standards of service. But when you approve a developer to build significantly higher and denser than the neighbourhood plan contemplates, you fall well behind on those parkland targets. And this is what we're seeing in the inner city, where residents who used to be, in many respects, quite pro-density and didn't have concerns about, as stronger concerns about rapid development, are increasingly turning against densification because they see that that densification and rapid development isn't accompanied by the creation of new public parkland. And these small plazas and town squares, while nice, they don't actually meet the needs of that increased population even within that development site. And that's why I think residents often feel like council is not doing a particularly good job at the negotiating table or is giving developers a very generous concession and very generous deal. And certainly that's my view as well. If a developer was genuinely proposing a massive, valuable increase in public parkland, maybe that's a conversation the community should have. But often what we're doing is saying to the developer, yep, you can build an extra 10 stories or you can build an extra 200-300 apartments, and all the community gets is a little concrete area with a couple of extra seats and landscaping. And I just don't think that's a particularly good proposition for council. I understand over in Toowong, and maybe Councillor Adams will correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the neighbourhood plan there required an actual publicly owned urban common, a public park, to be provided. And it seems like instead of the public park, are we not getting that public park now? I'll wait for the comments, but it really kind of, I think, raises the question about whether a privately owned, publicly accessible space is the same as a genuine public parkland, and I don't think it is. There are some things you can do in public parks that you can't do in these privately owned plazas and spaces. We've certainly had experiences in the past where much of Dockside around Kangaroo Point, it has a lot of privately owned open green spaces, and residents might want to use that to walk their dogs or for various kinds of recreation. But because those spaces are privately owned by a body corporate, over time there's an increase in restriction placed on how those spaces can be used, and they no longer function as genuine public parks. They function as private lawns. And there's a difference between a private lawn or a private concrete plaza as opposed to public parkland. And I know some lobbyists and some developers argue that there is no difference, and that if you're sitting down by the river having a picnic on a nice patch of grass, you don't really care who owns it. And I think that's true for a picnic. I think if someone's just having a picnic on a patch of grass, they don't really care who owns it. But there are some uses of public space, including public meetings, more active sport and recreation, dog recreation, etc., that can't always occur on those privately owned spaces. And when council continually makes that trade-off and says, well, we're not getting a public park, but we're getting this private plaza or private space instead, that's good enough. If we keep doing that again and again, over time, we don't have enough of those actual public parks left to be able to meet the needs of a community. And so I would caution the Deputy Mayor, while it's great to seize opportunities where they come along, we need to make sure that they're actually a good deal for the community, because if we're allowing more density than the neighbourhood plan contemplated, even if we get a bit of a small public park or public plaza, it's not actually making up for the population growth associated with that development, and it's certainly not helping compensate for the existing shortage of green space that many of our suburbs are already facing. And as I said, I'm having a lot of trouble at the moment, for example, finding a skate park, finding location for a skate park in West End. There's been quite a few new developments built that have publicly accessible open spaces around the edge of the development. But of course, you can't use any of those publicly accessible open spaces to put in a skate park. No developer or no body corporate is going to allow you to do that. And so if council just keeps saying, well, we don't need public parks because we've got these publicly accessible, privately owned open spaces, over time we end up with a real shortage of genuine public space to locate those community facilities that can sometimes not be so well located really close to residential and maybe even commercial uses. We're also seeing...
Councillor Sri, your time has expired. Sure. Further speakers? Councillor Cumming.
That's all. Thank you, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, I'd ask that item B be dealt with seriatim for voting purposes.
Item B, seriatim for voting.
And item B of the committee report refers to a petition requesting council reject the development application for a childcare centre at 18 to 22 Ernest Street, Manly. Mr Chair, Ernest Street between the Gordon Parade, Manly Road Junction and St John Vianney's School, a distance of several hundred metres, is an incredibly busy section of roadway. At the western end there's a busy roundabout built on the junction of Gordon Parade, Manly Road and Ernest Street, and there's a busy BP garage alongside the roundabout. The proposed childcare centre is close to the garage, and the next feature is an entry to the busy Manly Railway Station car park. Next is a side street, Curtis Street, but next door to that is the Manly State School, which is bursting at the seams with about 710 students enrolled this year. It's a very busy school and very busy, obviously, at drop-off and pick-up times as well. There's another already an existing childcare centre, only opened last year, I think, across the road from the Manly State School. It's got caters for 86 children. And then adjoining the Manly State School is St Paul's Anglican Church. And finally, on the top of the rise, as you'd expect it to be, is the St John Vianney's Catholic Primary School, which has 487 students and has grown strongly in recent years as well. So you can imagine how busy this section of Ernest Street is when the school drop-off and collection times are. Ernest Street needs 108 places childcare centre, which is what it's proposed for this site. With a paltry 23 car parks, it needs it like a hole in the head. Council should be proceeding to a speedy refusal, not dragging out an assessment process and incurring substantial costs itself and causing the developer to pay out tens of thousands of development costs for what should be regarded as a hopeless application. I urge Council to refuse this application, and I don't support the petition response.
Further speakers? Further speakers? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and I thank the councillors for their contribution. I expected that speech from Councillor Sri, and I probably walked straight into it, talking mainly about public realm outcome when it came to these buildings, and that's absolutely the case. And I have to say, I listened very carefully, and I have to agree to disagree. I don't believe most people that move into apartments in West End move in for the green space. I think they move in for the extremely amazing infrastructure and closeness to the city and the beating heart that is, well, the beauty of West End, but also the closeness to South Brisbane, to South Bank, to the CBD and all of those aspects. Probably the last thing they're thinking about is if I have a park, a lot of park very, very close to me. But there is still park in West End. Councillor Sri, I know, always conveniently forgets to add South Bank in his calculations when it comes to open space in the South Brisbane area. But these buildings, yes, they provide some public realm.
Point of order, Councillor Sri. Councillor Adams, will you take a question? No, she's declined. Please proceed.
We did focus on the public realm outcome on here, but I think I need to make it clear this is not the only reason that there is performance outcomes that are approved through these buildings. And I just have to make it very clear, Councillor Sri used the absolute terminology that is not correct, saying that they get exemptions. This is not exemptions. This is called performance outcome criteria based on the Planning Act by the state government. And the one I know that Councillor Sri mentioned, so I'll use that, is West Village, about the little patch of public grass that everybody likes. West Village, we approved that at 15 stories, which was the neighbourhood plan, and it got called in from the outrage of the local councillor at the time and the local state member no longer with us, maybe not for very long, but they called it in. They called it in, and what did they do, Councillor Sri? They made it higher. So I don't think the state government has any issues with the height that is being proposed in these areas as well, because they made it higher themselves. But the point I wanted to make is this is not just about public realm. That is a bonus, absolutely. But this is also about community benefit. You have a look underneath Metro, for example. Metro Arts, look under Metro, under West Village. Metro Arts is there now. They've got a theatre. They've got art. They have got a fantastic community benefit from that building. That would never have happened if it wasn't, and I give them their credit, they called it in, they made it higher, but they got the public outcome for it. And that's what we like to see. The Coronation Drive example, and Councillor Strunk agreed with us in committee last week, great public outcome, yet but a beautiful pre-1911 house being renovated that the community are going to see and be able to use with a water feature connecting to the river. And, might I say, This building, which was 15 stories in the neighbourhood plan, got 35 stories, hit 31 out of 31 of the building that breathes criteria, the things that make buildings sustainable. I'm sick and tired of hearing about car ratios from Councillor Sri, because we know what he would like when it comes to cars, and that's none. And the reality of that is ridiculous. But 31 out of 31 buildings that breathe, those are the outcomes we want to see. Less reliance on air conditioning, less reliance on electricity, on cooling, on all of those energy features that make buildings, even at that height, more like the Queenslanders that we know that address our subtropical sites. And as I said, Coronation Drive's got the heritage. South City Square, yes, it's got an urban plaza, but there was road widening, there was transport infrastructure that was delivered where the bus bays are indented, the movement of people through that area, and it's not very far from the Gabba, it's a highly trafficked area, is majorly improved. So yes, the committee focused on the public realm area, and I heard Councillor Sri with little bits of park here and there that doesn't count, but they all add up. And this is not at council's expense. This is not trunk infrastructure. And we stand by our buildings that breathe and our plan for Brisbane to have the most clean, green, sustainable building. And whether you believe in the commercialisation or not, Councillor Sri, I know it's a philosophical belief, but when it comes down to it, it's got to be economically sustainable or they're not going to do it. So we need to realise the performance outcomes of creating maybe taller, slimmer buildings if at the ground plane we are getting things that the people of Brisbane want, need and make us a better city in the long run as well. And on the bonus, and I take offence to the so-called green building that we're seeing in his ward at the moment, something that will bring people from around the world. The only other building like it is in Milan. Says the person who's on that planning committee? No. Oh, no, obviously not. The only other building like it is in Milan. This would be a tourist attraction, a fantastic outcome. The more the scream, the more they hate the answer, Mr Chairman, and I'll take that as a compliment. I'll put the report to the chamber.
Councillors on item A, all those who support item A, please say aye. Aye. And to the contrary, no. The ayes have it. And on item B, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And the contrary, no. No. The ayes have it. Division called by Councillor Cumming and Councillor Strunk. Please ring the bells. Councillors, on item B, all those in favour, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Thank you. And those against, please say no and raise your hand. No. Clerks, read the result when you're ready, please.
Mr Chair, the ayes have it, the voting being 18 in favour and 6 against.
The ayes have it. We'll now proceed to the Public and Active Transport Committee, please. Councillor Murphy.
Mr Chair, I move that the report of the Public and Active Transport Committee meeting held on Tuesday the 16th of February 2021 be adopted.
Seconded.
It's been moved by Councillor Murphy, seconded by Councillor Owen, that the report of the Public and Active Transport Committee meeting dated Tuesday the 16th of February 2021 be adopted. Is there any debate? Councillor Murphy. Any other councillors? Further speakers? Councillor Murphy. We'll now proceed. All those in favour of the resolution, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it. Councillors, the Infrastructure Committee. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I move that the report of the Infrastructure Committee meeting held on Tuesday the 16th of February 2021 be adopted.
Seconded.
It's been moved by Councillor McLaughlin, seconded by Councillor Landers, that the report of the Infrastructure Committee meeting dated Tuesday the 16th of February 2021 be adopted. Is there any debate? Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just briefly, a few items before us, but the committee presentation, item A last week, was about, or continuing the theme that I talked to in question time today, and that is the great projects that we're undertaking to improve road safety for all our users. And the one that we talked about last week in the committee was right on the border of Brisbane City Council with Logan, the Rochdale Road and Priestdale Road intersection upgrade. This is, Mr Chair, a Better Roads for Brisbane upgrade being undertaken in the suburb of Rochdale. And as I mentioned briefly, this was right on the border of Brisbane City Council and Logan City Council. It's surrounded by 6 schools, has an early learning centre, several residential areas and a very busy fruit market. At the moment, Mr Chair, the intersection is a single lane roundabout which isn't able to handle the 19,000 vehicles it's carrying each day. And as the intersection connects to many schools, there are severe congestion issues happening each day, particularly around school drop-off and pick-up times. And on top of that, there isn't a great active travel infrastructure that is needed for school students to walk and ride to school. So, and there have been crashes there, which can be resolved by the upgrade that we're undertaking. This will be changed from the roundabout that's currently there to a 4-lane signalised crossing, a $41 million project to replace that roundabout with that signalised intersection. Signalised pedestrian crossings on all legs will be included, and Rochdale will be widened to a 4-lane width at the intersection. And in addition to that, there'll be new on-road cycling facilities, as well as an off-road shared path constructed to encourage active travel. So we are, Mr Chair, working with the Logan City Council on this one, and in conjunction with the Australian Government, with the support from their respective budgets. The federal government is providing $14 million through the Urban Congestion Fund, and Brisbane City Council is taking the lead on the design and delivery of this project, which is expected to be started roughly 12 months after the finalisation of design, which will be in the middle of the year. There will be, Councillor Huang, a community consultation event on Saturday the 13th of March, and local residents will be receiving a newsletter about it in coming weeks. And I'm sure you, Councillor Huang, and your residents will be looking forward to addressing the issues of traffic, which is essentially traffic coming through to Brisbane from Logan Council, but this is the intersection work that we need to undertake to make that location safer for all users. Mr Chair, there were 3 petitions in addition to the committee presentation. I'll leave it to the council to see if there's any debate.
Further speakers? Further speakers? Councillor McLaughlin. I'll now put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. Councillors, the Environment, Parks and Sustainability Committee, please. Councillor Cunningham.
Mr Chair, I move that the report of the Environment, Parks and Sustainability Committee meeting held on Tuesday the 16th of February 2021 be adopted.
Seconded.
It's been moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Davis, that the report of the Environment, Parks and Sustainability Committee meeting dated Tuesday the 16th of February 2021 be adopted. Is there any debate? Councillor Cunningham.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Our committee presentation last week was on the draft Brisbane off-road cycling strategy. Councillors will be aware there is growing demand for off-road cycling in Brisbane. Mount Coot-tha Reserve is the first and only designated location for mountain bike single tracks in Brisbane, and these are at capacity. Additionally, we have seen the construction of a number of unauthorised trails in our natural areas and strong demand for additional facilities. That is why Council has released the draft off-road cycling strategy. It aims to guide the future long-term off-road cycling opportunities in some selected bushland reserves and parks across the city. At the same time, we will ensure that we find places in our natural areas where we can minimise the risk of degrading these important habitat areas. We've engaged closely with stakeholders during the development of the draft strategy, and there has been an extensive process involved. We will continue to engage and listen to stakeholders. The official consultation period began back in December 2020 and ends this Sunday. We've had over 2,000 residents complete the online survey, and there have been dozens and dozens of written submissions. Council will review the feedback closely as we review the draft strategy. We also had 3 petitions, Mr Chair. Just briefly on item C, while I did have the opportunity to talk about this in question time today, there are some further points to make. There has been some contention from the local MP that council's unwillingness to voluntarily hand back the land, which the state already owns, somehow puts the state in a precarious legal position. For the avoidance of all doubt, I will say the following, and listen carefully. I have been clearly advised that the Minister does not need council to agree to the revocation. The Minister may revoke all or part of a reserve if they determine it is in the public interest. It is their call. I'll leave the rest to the chamber.
Further speakers? Councillor Johnston.
Yes, just briefly on item A and perhaps item B. I think for reasons that will become immediately apparent over the next little bit of time, I don't think anything Councillor Cunningham says to us now can be trusted based on advice from the department, given their actions in parts of the city over recent weeks. It's very concerning, so I'll take that with a grain of salt, and I'm sure all will become clearer in due course. Briefly with respect to item A, I sat through this presentation last week, and I have had the off-road cycling strategy consultation period out in all of my communications channels for people to participate in. When you look at the map, there are no sites within Tennyson Ward that are included, but there are 82 sites around the city. I don't think council's got this right. The extent of these trails through bushland and parkland areas is extensive, and there are significant environmental impacts that flow from this process. Now, as I said, this is not directly impacting on my ward, and I'm sure all local councillors that have, these pathways that are being proposed in their ward will be able to make some further comments. But here's what I know about how council manages these sorts of conflicts between the environment and cyclists. They back the cyclists, which is fair enough. But how on earth is council going to properly manage these natural areas of significant biodiversity, as well as keeping an eye on how these tracks are used? I think a better course of action would be to nominate certain areas, one in each region of our city perhaps, north, south, east, west. I mean, central's obviously a little bit harder. But certainly we should be looking at having dedicated mountain biking type facilities in geographically significant parts of the city, rather than having this open slather approach that is proposed. That would mean that the mountain bike facilities can be kept in good nick. The environmental impacts of the strategy can be managed more carefully by council through the officers, and ensuring the habitat is protected. So I think that the desire here to do something to improve off-road cycling for mountain bike people is a good one, but I think that the scale and the scope of what council's proposing here is going to create conflict between cyclists and the environmental values that Brisbane is renowned for. It's Australia's most biodiverse capital city, and I think there are some really genuine issues here. So I would just urge council to look at a more strategic approach, to find locations in each of the regions and to develop a suitable facility for mountain bike riders in each of those geographic areas. That's what they've done for the skateboard enthusiasts. I mean, there's only two, one in Darra and one in Bracken Ridge. But that's the kind of approach I think council could take in each of the 4 regions in our city, and I think that would lead to a better outcome for both the cyclists, who would have dedicated facilities that council could actively manage, but also for our local environment to ensure it is not adversely impacted by what is proposed, which is quite extensive cycling through natural areas. So I just think this needs to be revised. The scale and the scope of it is too broad.
Further speakers?
Chair.
Councillor Aderman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I rise to speak about item A, Brisbane's off-road cycling strategy. As the Chair has indicated from day one, this draft strategy is about trying to get a balance between conservation and recreation. Mount Coot-tha in my ward is a prime example. It's one of our city's crown jewels and can and should be for the enjoyment of all. We can't ignore the popularity of off-road cycling as a sport, and if this is encouraging people to get out and be fit and healthy, then that can only be a good thing. We have sanctioned trails on the mountain, and Council has memoranda of understandings with users such as off-road cycling groups to maintain them. I also get the concerns raised about protecting the natural environment, and I support that. In assessing opportunities for more off-road cycling, it's important we back this up with strong compliance. Use the sanctioned trails by all means, but go and create unauthorised trails and damage the environment, and you'll pay the penalty. Mr Chair, at the invitation of the Brisbane Off-Road Riders Alliance last Saturday, I accepted an invitation to walk Whitbird Way on Mount Coot-tha. I can report that the maximum number of volunteers were out in the heat for over half the day maintaining that trail. Those I spoke to along the way talked about the passion for their sport and the importance of preserving our natural assets. I was particularly impressed with what they were doing to ensure the protection of waterways on the mountain and the natural environment. I know there have been large numbers of submissions as part of the community consultation with this strategy, and that's a good thing. But I remain hopeful, even confident, that we will get the balance right for all stakeholders going forward. Thank you.
Further speakers? Councillor Griffiths.
Yes, thank you, Mr Chair, and I rise excuse me, to also speak on the off-road cycling strategy. And the first thing I'd like to make in relation to this point is that very disappointed that we asked 6 questions on notice in relation to details of basic data that you would expect in relation to the damage caused and the amount of money spent by Council in relation to the management of the off-road cycling strategy, and none of that data is kept. None of that data is kept. Yet even though I'm aware that in the southern region there is significant expenditure in relation to repairing damage from off-road cycling in Toohey Forest and Karawatha Forest. And in fact, they can't keep up with the repairs to the new tracks that are being created. So I must admit, I'm a bit flummoxed that Council on the ground, the officers can give me information, but at the policy level, that information doesn't exist. And I think that's a sad indictment of the way news is functioning at the moment, that it isn't keeping basic information that you would expect them to keep if they were developing a strategy like this. The second point I want to make is, yes, we agree the off-road cycling strategy is important, and it is important that we get it right. And from what we have seen, there's lots of good points in the strategy. So there's lots of things we agree with. But there are certainly areas where we disagree, and they are significant. And I suppose the standout point particularly relates to off-road cycling competing with the value of conservation. They are at odds. And I know we just heard a story from other councils talking about the great work that a group of cyclists do in restoring damaged pathways, and that is good. But that is not happening all the time, and it's not happening in every place. And in fact, when I speak to habitat groups around the city, they tell me that Mount Coot-tha is like, and the best way they describe it is like a broken egg. So it has so many tracks over it and so much damage done to it that it actually has lost its significance as an environmental in terms of catering for the environmental issues there and conservation issues there. So my concern is that with this strategy, we're opening up many, many parks across Brisbane and many, many conservation areas where their primary value to us is about conservation. For me, I know of 3 of those places: Toohey Forest, Karawatha Forest and Whites Hill Reserve, to name a few. They're on the south side. Those places are significant because they are islands of bushland in suburbia, and they are home to so much flora and fauna. And we've got to decide, are we using those areas for recreation, and it will be growing recreational use into the future because the city's density is increasing, or are we preserving those areas for conservation? And if I had to say what I think, I believe those areas should be kept for conservation. Doesn't mean locking them up totally, but it certainly means limiting the amount of off-road cycling we allow in there. And I hope the administration listen to that, because I understand that the cycle lobby is very strong and very convincing, and the conservation lobby is probably not as strong as convincing. But as a city, that's what we need to be thinking about. In terms of, I pick up Councillor Johnston's points. I think there's opportunities to define areas in each region where we actually say these areas aren't as significant as conservation values, so we should be using them for off-road cycling, and dedicate some spots in the city for off-road cycling. Once again, and I suppose the most significant thing I believe, and the biggest mistake being made here, is we've gone ahead and developed this strategy, but the city doesn't have a conservation strategy. The conservation strategy should be informing the off-road cycling strategy. A conservation strategy should be informing our bushland buyback strategy. It makes sense for us as the city to have a conservation strategy. Once we have that, then the other strategies fall out of it. At the moment, the off-road cycling strategy is the big thing, and we just tack on conservation. And I believe most residents would be disturbed to think that we have users in our parks that are damaging our parks, say with off-road use, but we're actually using, and as I understand it, our bushland fund to repair that damage. Most people would want to see the bushland money that they have being spent on buying bushland. I suppose in a couple of other points I'd just like to make in concluding this, this speech is there is so little, if no enforcement of the cycling laws at the moment. We don't actually, and the administration has no knowledge, and we've proved this now, with regards to the number of illegal trails, although I know there are figures for the South region. And we should also be thinking about how we best use our bushland money into the future. And I don't believe using our bushland money should be used to repair recreational use from people who are using our parks illegally. Okay. Yes, sorry, I also just had to ask for item C to be taken seriatim for voting.
Item C will be taken seriatim for voting.
Yep, thank you.
Yep. Further speakers? Further speakers? Councillor Cassidy.
Thanks very much, Chair. I just would like to speak on item C, the petition before us today, and this has been talked about a bit already by Councillor Cunningham, and she seemed to infer, Chair, earlier that someone is saying that the state government is in a precarious legal position over this issue, and I think she might have missed the point entirely about this. I think the history of this whole site and the transfer to Council's trusteeship has been well litigated, and the reasons for that. But what we know is that the state government sought through Council a surrender of that trusteeship back to the state government for the purposes of Balmoral High, which is a school that is growing exponentially and immensely over the last few years, and is projected to grow immensely over the coming years. So I think it's pretty clear to council, both publicly and through communication, that the state government, as the owner of the land, wanted that site back for the purposes of Education Queensland. So instead of, and Councillor Cunningham sort of seemed to suggest earlier that I'd release some big state secret in saying that this is, in her words, a fait accompli, that this is going to happen. Well, I think that's quite obvious, and that's been quite obvious for a number of months. But what I can glean from all this is that the state government sought council's cooperation in that, and council has decided not to cooperate. And that's essentially what's before us today. The petition was calling on council to cooperate through that process and work with the state government instead of delaying it. And by doing what they are doing, and what is recommended in this petition response, is to delay it as long as possible. And the only part of the community that's harming is school kids, essentially. So this administration's actions are political in nature. We heard that because all Councillor Cunningham spoke about in her answer to an earlier question was all about politics, all about the LNP this and Labor that, and the state election this and state election that. But she never actually spoke about the issue at hand, which was that this is going to benefit the next generation of people. This is going back to a school. So, Chair, I think that's reflective more of this administration, how they approach these types of things, always with a political lens on, rather than looking at the bigger picture of how this will affect a community. So we certainly don't support this petition recommendation because council could have been much more cooperative throughout this process, and they absolutely have not been.
Further speakers?
Yep.
Councillor Cumming.
Just quickly on relation to item A, I had this issue arise in my area some years ago. One of the local schools has mountain biking almost as the school sport. They developed jumps and other types of facilities like that on their own land, and they were looking for an area where they had wide open paths where they could ride faster through bushland, on the earth, not on roadways. And one of the local parks has some fire trails through it, which my estimate would be they'd be 10 metres wide. So it wouldn't mean a case of, bush bashing, as some people call it, which is, I think that's going to just damage the environment, and that's no good at all. But it would have been, I think, there was a couple of trails that could have been used, 400 or 500 metres of land and length of land, and they could have used that. It wasn't allowed in the end, but I think a strategy like this is something that's important to consider. Fire trails 10 metres wide aren't going to cause damage to the environment, as opposed to other areas where people are riding through close to or over the top of bushland, which we don't want to see at all. So it's important, very important, to look after the environment, but I think there's a possibility of a compromise solution where there are, as Councillor Johnson said, there's some selected areas across the city, a limited number of selected areas where people can go to ride their bikes. The other thing is the alternative for the school was to go to the Daisy Hill Recreation Reserve, which I believe is in Logan, and I've been to. It's about an hour's drive away from where the school is, and I think that's hardly a satisfactory solution either. Thank you.
Further speakers? Further speakers? Councillor Cunningham.
Yes, thanks, Mr Chair. Well, I'd like to thank all councillors in this place for their comments and feedback, and that will be taken into consideration as we review the draft strategy. I'd also welcome submission from councillors, so I look forward to receiving those. You have until Sunday. Through you, Chair, to Councillor Griffiths, we on this side of the chamber believe that money for bushland should be spent on management, not just purchasing. We believe that the best way to teach the next generation to value nature is to actually share it with them. We're not about to spend public money buying public land to lock it up and throw away the key. And that's our position, and we will remain firm on that position. Thank you.
Councillors, to items A, B and D. A, B and D. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And those against, please say no. The ayes have it. On item C, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And those against, please say no. No. The ayes have it.
Division.
Division called by Councillor Strunk and Councillor Cassidy. Please ring the bells. Councillors, on item C, all those in favour, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. And those against, please say no and raise your hand. No. Clerks, please read the result when you're ready.
Mr Chair, the ayes have it, the voting being 19 in favour and 6 against.
The ayes have it. On item C, councillors, I was advised before the meeting that Councillor Cook may have a conflict of interest on the matter of item C. However, she was not present for any point of the debate, was not present for the decision and was not present for the vote. So the requirements of conflict are satisfied. On Councillor Howard, the City Standards Community Health and Safety Committee, please. Oh, excuse me, Councillor Marx. Councillor Marx.
Giving away my portfolio, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, I move that the report on the City Standards Community Health and Safety Committee meeting held on Tuesday the 16th of February 2021 be adopted.
Seconded. So moved by Councillor Marx, seconded by Councillor Toomey, the report of the City Standards Community Health and Safety Committee meeting dated Tuesday the 16th of February 2021 be adopted. Is there any debate? Councillor Marx.
Yes, thank you, Mr Chair. Look, can I start by thanking Councillor Toomey for very kindly agreeing to take over my committee presentation for me this morning. Lord Mayor and I were gratefully able to head out to Vizzy, to the recycling plant, and I want to thank them for hosting him, myself and the Lord Mayor at their recycling centre. It was a very well-informed visit, and there was an opportunity to talk about one of the issues that they have that creates a few problems for them and obviously our drivers in that space is people who are putting batteries in their recycling bins. I don't know if people are familiar with the term hot load, but that's what happens when they actually get a battery in the truck. They have heat sensors within their trucks, and at that point the truck driver has to actually stop the vehicle and basically unload the whole load of whatever they have in their truck on the road. That's something we would like to avoid at all costs if possible. So hopefully people will take some of that education out of there. Don't put your batteries in the recycling. And also plastic bags. It's a real shame to see just how many plastic bags continue to be put into the recycling bins. I think if we get rid of all of those, we'd be certainly halfway there to doing a much better job in recycling. But again, thank Vizzy for hosting us here this morning. Last week's committee presentation was on partnerships and animal services, and I want to thank the council officers who work in this space. They work very, very hard in partnership with a number of different companies to look after our animals, making sure that they're looked after and that if they are roaming or lost, that they are fed and taken care of until they're reunited with their owners. So I'll leave the further debate to the chamber. Thank you.
Further speakers? Further speakers? Councillor Marx. I'll now put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And those against, please say no. The ayes have it. Councillors, the Community Arts and Nighttime Economy Committee, please. Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I move that the report of the Community Arts and Nighttime Economy Committee meeting held on Tuesday the 16th of February 2021 be adopted.
Seconded.
It's been moved by Councillor Howard, seconded by Councillor Landers, that the report of the Community Arts and Nighttime Economy Committee dated the 16th of February 2021 be adopted. Is there any debate? Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just very briefly before I move to the report, this week's events was the Queensland Symphony Orchestra, and can I say what a great delight it was for people to be able to return to the concert hall at QPAC, and a very pleasant evening with the Maestro concerts, Arabian Nights, that was held on Saturday night. We are blessed in Brisbane to have an orchestra of the calibre of the Queensland Symphony Orchestra, and the performance on Saturday night was actually recorded so that it could be replayed on ABC Classics. So I encourage everyone in the chamber to make sure that they listen to that. I also briefly want to touch on something the Lord Mayor mentioned earlier, which was the COVID-19 Direct Assistance Program afternoon tea, which we held on Sunday afternoon, and I know that there were very many of my colleagues there, and I know that Councillor Cumming joined us. And can I just say that it was a fantastic event, and it was wonderful to see so many organisations, and I really want to thank the Lord Mayor for the vision that he had for that particular grant, because it was something that was so necessary to keep our organisations afloat, and I think everyone that was there on Sunday truly appreciated the work that was done. And I'd just like to put on record my thanks to the wonderful council officers who made that all happen. $3 million expended to all of our community organisations is nothing short of fantastic, and I really want to thank them and the Lord Mayor for that COVID Direct Assistance program. Moving to the report, we had a committee presentation on our wonderful Brisbane Greeters, who of course celebrated 9 years on the 14th of February. So love was in the air at Victoria Park on the 14th of February. We enjoyed a fantastic afternoon tea, and it was just amazing to hear the stories of some of the greeters, many of whom were had been doing the greeting for quite a long time. We had 4 of our original greeters were there, and they surely had some exciting stories to tell us. And so can I encourage everyone in the chamber to promote what the Brisbane greeters do within your wards, because we do have walks that happen, throughout some of our suburbs. We have suburbs such as Bulimba, Paddington, Fortitude Valley and West End, and bookings are available 7 days a week. You do have to go online to book because of our COVID restrictions. But again, I just want to thank each and every one of the greeters for the work that they contribute to making this city such a beautiful place for people to visit, and particularly with COVID, to have our residents explore their own suburbs and to have the ability for the Brisbane greeters to perhaps give them some history of their suburb and to make it such an enjoyable experience. There was also one petition which was requesting Council reinstate and fund the Brisbane Greeters program, which of course we were delighted to do. So I will leave debate to the chamber.
Further speakers? Councillor Cumming.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, I refer to item B. That report seems that the response to petition seems to leave out something there. It seems to leave out that the greeters were set to be wiped out by the administration after they slashed funding for the Brisbane Economic Development Agency. They were dead and buried. The poor old greeters, dead and buried. And it took a good campaign from the opposition, and it took petitions like this from Councillor Cook to get the greeters reinstated. So we think the greeters do a good job, but this administration went close to wiping them out.
Further speakers? Further speakers? Anyone?
Yep.
Councillor Johnston.
Yeah, thank you. Just to take up Councillor Adams' usual response when there's a bit of interjection from the other side. They were a bit noisy, weren't they? That's because they were caught out trying to kill off the Brisbane Greeters, a much supported and popular program in Brisbane. It was very clear that they were either trying to commercialise it or kill it, and it's only because of public pressure from those wonderful volunteers and a number of councillors in this chamber. It is no credit to the LNP whatsoever. They caused this problem. It was unnecessary. It was badly handled, and it caused a lot of concern to those volunteers. So, quite frankly, shame on you because you created a problem that was completely unnecessary.
Further speakers? Any further speakers? Councillor Howard.
Well, Mr Chair, isn't it amazing how we can rewrite history, how we can create stories? And can I just say, it was the Lord Mayor that was out there telling people that the greeters were a much loved and revered group of people who, of course, we were going to look after. And no thanks whatsoever to those on the other side.
Councillors, please allow Councillor Howard to be heard. Councillor Howard.
I'll just give them a little history lesson, shall I, through you, Mr Chair? Yes, please. So, originally launched by Brisbane City Council and Brisbane Marketing, now known as Brisbane Economic Development Agency, in early 2012, with only 12 greeters, the program was in response to the 2011 floods and was designed to encourage people back to Brisbane and to leverage the spirit of volunteering sparked by the Mud Army. Since that time, it has grown into a highly successful program with more than 100 volunteers delivering tours in more than 16 languages. It's been extremely well supported by the residents who are eager to volunteer and share insights with the visitors. Since 2012, the program has delivered more than 14,000 tours to more than 80,000 visitors, with more than half of these being international visitors. Now, Mr Chair, don't know about you, but there seemed to be a pandemic that meant that we had no international visitors coming to our shores. We also have a number of our greeters who were in the vulnerable age group, and which we value their contribution to this city. The program was put on hold because of COVID. It was put on hold because of COVID, and it was brought back as a result of the Lord Mayor and the Schrinner Council administration providing the funding, providing the means for the wonderful greeters to come back and also, I think, new uniforms. The greeters are over the moon about the way that they've now been brought back into the fold of the Brisbane City Council. They're loving every minute. I might just mention just a few of their comments, because volunteer greeter Anne-Marie White says, "I feel privileged to be a greeter. It's a joy to show visitors my special places in my hometown of Brisbane." And I think we have another one here from Charlie. Charlie loves being a greeter and likes to take the time to get to know his guests. Charlie loves to research, and in his spare time is walking the streets of the suburbs with a notepaper and pen, looking for interesting things to go home and research. Being a Brisbane greeter lets me share all the things I really enjoy about Brisbane with guests who are invariably happy to be here and love to soak it all up. So through you, Mr Chair, this program is and will continue to provide meaningful opportunities for volunteers to share their knowledge, guests and visitors to feel safe and comfortable getting to know Brisbane, and for businesses to leverage these connections. I look forward to sharing further progress of the program in the future.
I'll now put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And those against, please say no. The ayes have it. Councillors, the Finance and Administration and Small Business Committee, please. Councillor Allen.
Mr Chair, I move that the report of the Finance, Administration and Small Business Committee meeting held on Tuesday the 16th of February 2021 be adopted.
Seconded. It's been moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Huang, that the report of the Finance, Administration and Small Business Committee meeting dated Tuesday the 16th of February 2021 be adopted. Is there any debate? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr Chair. At the meeting last week, we had a presentation on the first homeowner rebate scheme. We had an update, and just for the benefit of the chamber, I will touch upon some of the highlights related to that presentation. So, as you'd be aware, the rebate is a partial rebate of rates and charges for eligible homeowners. It first kicked off in the 1st of October 2019 with a 50% rebate to a maximum of $1,000 for existing houses and units. From the 1st of October 2020, there was another element to it, which was a 100% rebate to a maximum of $2,000 for new builds. And the rebate is over a 12-month period from the point of approval. Now, the people who can apply for this are Australian citizens or permanent residents over 18 years where the property is in the Brisbane local government area, buying or building a new or established home with a value, including land, at less than $750,000. And the eligibility criteria includes that they do not currently own or have not previously owned a home in Australia, and will occupy the home as a principal place of residence for a continuous period of at least 6 months within the first 12 months of title transfer the title transfer date or the build completion date. The mechanism for applying for the rebate is either via an online application form or, if necessary, a hard copy application. Now, since this started in 2019, 5,181 accounts have been approved as of the 6th of February 2021, so obviously a scheme that's very keenly supported, and total rebates to that date totalled just over $2 million. The first rebates, in terms of the rebate transition period, the first rebates applied in January 2020, and there's a 12-month rebate period has passed, so the transitioning is now tailing off. In terms of the take-up, there are 193 suburbs across Brisbane where applicants have applied and been successful. And in addition to that presentation at the committee last week, we had a regular report, the Bank and Investment Report for December 2020, and I'll leave further debate to the chamber.
Further speakers? Further speakers? Councillor Allen. I'll now put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it. Councillors, are there any petitions? Councillor Adaman.
Thank you, Chair. A petition in relation to a dog off-leash area enhancements.
Councillor Johnston.
Yes, I have a petition from Sherwood residents requesting a Kadaji tree in Robertson Street be removed.
Are there any others? Any other petitions? Councillor Landis.
Mr Chair, I move that the petitions as presented be received and referred to the committee concerned for consideration and report.
Second. It's been moved by Councillor Landis, seconded by Councillor Strunk, that all petitions as presented be received and referred to the committee concerned for consideration and report. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And those against, please say no. The ayes have it. Councillors, general business. Are there any statements required as a result of an Office of the Independent Assessor or Councillor Ethics Committee order? I don't believe there's any movement. Councillors, is there any ordinary general business? Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I rise to speak tonight in regards to the new Heathwood Distribution Centre that is located in my ward. So earlier last week, the Lord Mayor and I had the pleasure of going out there to celebrate the start of construction on this new state-of-the-art temperature-controlled $184 million distribution centre. And this is a significant investment, not only in our city, but also for the many different partners that they have. And it's also a major investment in jobs for our people in our city. Now, during COVID, we've seen that we've had many supermarkets right across our nation and right across the world that have had many workers who have been out there on the front line. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to say a very special thank you to all those staff members at all the supermarkets, whether they're on the checkouts, cleaning the areas with the trolleys, whether they're stocking the shelves, whether they're working in the distribution centres or on a forklift. These are all the people that have made sure that during the pandemic, the general consumer has been able to access goods in order to keep their family fed. So that is a very vital job that those many people have actually undertaken. So it was a privilege to formally welcome the Woolworths Distribution Centre into our local community. And there's a number of very important facts about this distribution centre because it is a state-of-the-art centre, it is temperature controlled, and it does go a long way to enhancing a partnership for Hilton Foods, which is co-located on the same logistics site. So Woolworths have focused on the importance of strong, responsive and resilient food and grocery supply chain and has really had that focus, particularly in relation to this site. Now, they have put in a major investment into this infrastructure network and we are seeing the results of it in our local community. So it's a 42,000 square metre facility. It's all temperature controlled. Different warehouses and spaces within the facility have got different temperature controls, and how they're doing it between some of the bays is absolutely cutting edge. It will deliver faster, fresher and more efficient deliveries of both frozen and long life chilled products, and this will go to about 260 stores throughout Queensland and northern New South Wales. So if you actually think of Suncorp Stadium's playing field, the size of this facility is equivalent to about 3 times the size of Suncorp Stadium. So it is no small facility at all. It is quite large, and at full capacity, it will contain approximately over 2 million cartons, and those 2 million cartons of stock per week will be moved, and there will be over 4,000 product lines. And we will see that because of this facility, we will have, and the air bridge that goes between Hilton, which is the meat supplier for Woolworths, and this distribution centre, instead of trucks having to go from the food area of Hilton's and then move across to the distribution centre to get the rest of their pallet stock to then take to the stores, the truck will come into the distribution centre. The coal product, the meat, will come across on the air bridge conveyor from Hilton's, and then that will be packed onto the pallets along with the other dry food and other supplies that truck is then taking to that particular store. So we're going to see significant logistical efficiencies coming out of this. And the other aspect as well is the jobs. So during the construction phase, there will be approximately 200 local jobs that will be coming into this area. And on top of that, there will be ongoing employment opportunities at the facility for about 300 people. So this is a lot for our local community, and I'm really, really pleased that they have engaged at an early stage to make sure that they had this partnership as well with Hilton Meats. Now, the other thing too that is quite significant around my ward is that a lot of my area is bound by the Logan Motorway and Bow Desert Road, both of which are significant road freight corridors. Now, just by co-locating this facility in this logistics precinct, this will mean that we will see a reduction of 390 truck movements per week. So this is going to mean a big, big difference to a lot of local residents. Now, I think that when we have got major companies like that making the investment in our city, we do need to acknowledge it. It is not something that they've just done overnight. They have put a lot of consideration in, a lot of planning and a lot of investment. And the one thing that I also think is quite unique in regards to this is that we have a sister city in Auckland. Woolworths and Hilton's have a sister setup that they're also setting up in Auckland. So what they're doing here in Brisbane, they're seeing the same thing replicated over in Auckland. So we need to make sure that we keep supporting local jobs, local investment in our city, and make sure that where possible, we keep the economy going. Thank you.
Further general business, Councillor Strunk.
Thank you, Chair. Shuvi Shah, which is a greeting hello in Bangla. I rise to speak in regards to about conserving your mother language. I'm honoured to represent one of the most multicultural wards in Brisbane City Council. I'm pleased to work and report that nearly a third of our city's population is born overseas, more than 22% of the households speaking a language other than English. I have many residents in my ward that embrace speaking a language other than English and are doing everything possible to preserve their native language. I can report that many language schools for young and old exist in my ward and right around Brisbane. It is an excellent way to respect and embrace and preserve the multicultural Australia. I am proud to recently have sat down with my good friend Dr. JD from the Bangladesh community, who was advocating and leading the way to preserve endangered languages and promote international and other languages for Mother Language Day. JD explained that the language is key to uphold and reflect individual cultures. When a language gets lost, most culture is lost, if not dismissed. His volunteering, tireless, alongside many to ensure that the native language of Bangla continues to be passed on to future generations. This year, on Saturday the 27th of February, the Mother Language Conservation Movement, the Bangladesh Association in Brisbane, and many other multicultural organisations will come together and observe International Mother Language Day at Redcliffe Place in Brisbane City at 11:30 a.m. I would like to thank Dr. JD and everyone who is working hard to conserve I knew I was going to have a problem with this word when I wrote it. I was going to say logistics, but that's not right. Of diversity. Sorry for stuffing up that word.
Further general business? There being none? Oh, Councillor Sri.
Thanks, Chair. I know everyone's keen to bug out before the storm, none more so than me, but I did just want to pick up on those discussions earlier about public green space, and hopefully Councillor McLaughlin and Councillor Cunningham and the Deputy Mayor will also help me relay some of these comments to Councillor Murphy and the Lord Mayor. There seems to be a general sentiment that loss of green space associated with new infrastructure isn't a significant concern and doesn't materially impact how public spaces are used, but I just want to place on the record very clearly that it does. Often the public projects we're talking about are really positive and beneficial and thus justified, but people don't use a concrete plaza next to a bridge in the same way that they use a quiet riverside park. And I'm sure Councillor Mackay will agree with me on this point because he's been hearing from a lot of his residents about this issue as well. When council takes away inner city riverfront parkland for other purposes, even if it's a very small amount in terms of net area, that does materially change how residents use those public parks. And I'm sure Councillor Cunningham's team will have been talking to her about their concerns with some of these projects where every year or every few years we drop another infrastructure project into a piece of parkland, and gradually over time, whether it's a bypass or a busway expansion or a new bridge landing, gradually over time we see the actual usable amount of public green space in these parks drastically reduced. And at some point we have to turn around and say, well, no, that's not an acceptable trajectory. I'm not saying we don't build stuff in parks. I'm simply saying that we need to factor the loss of parkland into the cost of these projects and budget accordingly. If council is building a project that requires private land to be converted, we compensate the landowner. In the same way, if council is building land taking land in a public park for some other project, the city projects team or the transport team should be compensating the news division. Money should be moving from the transport team or from the projects team into the parks budget so that money can be used to acquire new parkland. It's a fairly simple proposition, and other councils around the world already do this, but unfortunately Brisbane City Council doesn't. And as a result, we're seeing a gradual loss of a lot of that inner city green space in particular, but even other parks around the city, where the more stuff you cram into parks, the more infrastructure you cram into parks, the less space is left for sports fields in particular, but also other community facilities. It's been really sad in my ward that the West End Soccer Club still doesn't have a proper field. They're sharing the South's field, and it's pretty degraded and not quite big enough, and that's causing real concerns. And I'm sure there are other soccer clubs and cricket clubs and sports clubs across the city that are having trouble finding enough space for their community members. And really it highlights the need for more investment in public green space, and to draw a bit of a stronger line and say, we're not going to just keep carving up our public parks and public green spaces indefinitely for new infrastructure. At some point, we have to create more parkland to cater for our growing population. I'll leave it there.
Further speakers? Further speakers? There being none, declare the meeting closed.